Welcome to Cosmic Wand. Today's adventure, a voice said boss SOUL of orbit, when Harry defeated the Basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Color Behind the Eye. The Chamber of Secrets did not smell the way Harry had imagined it. He had thought stone and old water. Instead, it smelled of something that had been alive too long in the dark. A low reptilian musk that clung to the back of his throat and would not be swallowed away. Ginny Weasley lay on the wet floor with her hair spread out like a stain. Her chest moved, but only just, and the diary beside her open hand was doing something obscene to the light. Every time Harry looked at it, the pages seemed a shade blacker than the shadows around them, like the little book was quietly drinking the room. Tom Riddle stood over her with his hands folded, patient as a schoolmaster waiting for a slow pupil to arrive at the answer he already knew. "Let me introduce you," Riddle said to the guardian of Slytherin's line. He did not shout the words that woke it. He breathed them. The hiss went out of him and into the stone, and the stone answered. Harry felt the sound before he heard it. A weight moved somewhere above and behind the great carved face of Salazar Slytherin, a weight that made the water on the floor tremble in fine concentric rings around his shoes. He shut his eyes. Hermione's voice came back to him from a page torn out of a library book, folded small in a petrified fist. It kills with its stare. "Don't look. Whatever else you forget, don't look." So he did not look. He turned his face to the wall and ran, and the world narrowed to sound and the phoenix song threading through it, high and steady. A gold wire strung across the dark. The basilisk came down off the statue like a landslide with intent. He heard the wet slab of its length hitting the floor, the drag and gather of muscle, the particular obscene softness of something enormous moving fast. Fawkes screamed once. There was a sound Harry would remember for the rest of his life, which he did not yet know would be a strange and crowded thing. The sound of a bird's beak going into a serpent's eyes. A burst, twice. The basilisk's shriek climbed past the range where sound is pain and became something his teeth felt. "Your bird may have blinded it," Riddle called, and now there was an edge in the smooth voice. The first crack. "But it can still hear you. It can smell you. Run all you like." Harry ran. He did not run well. He ran into a pillar and took the skin off his shoulder and kept going, and behind him the long body followed the slap of his own feet in the water. Correcting, hunting by echo. The chamber was not built to be escaped in. It was built to end here at the feet of the founder, in front of the one witness who would never tell. He tried to think the way Hermione would think, which was the only weapon he had ever really trusted. The thing was blind now. It hunted by sound in the water and by the smell of him, and by the tremor a running boy makes in a flooded floor. So the water was the enemy, and the water was the map. He stopped splashing. He put his back to a pillar and went still, and made himself breathe through his mouth, slow, and the great blind head cast about the chamber a foot above the surface, tongue tasting the air in long forked pulls, and for 3 seconds it lost him. 3 seconds of it not knowing exactly where he was, which was 3 seconds more than he had owned since it came down off the statue. He used them to look properly for a weapon. There was the shed skin, useless. There were the broken pillars. There was the sword-shaped absence where sword ought to have been and was not. Because Harry had no sword, Harry had a hat and a dead girl and a talking book and a monster. And there was Fawkes, wheeling in the dark near the ceiling, small and gold and bleeding from where the fangs had grazed him, singing that thin, steady wire of a song that was the only thing in the chamber not trying to kill him. Then the basilisk found the sound of his heartbeat, which he could not stop, and struck at the pillar, and the pillar came apart, and Harry was moving again, and the plan such as it was went out of his head and left only the running. The sorting hat was still crushed against his chest where he had shoved it, and it was heavier than a hat had any right to be. His fist closed on something hard inside the felt. Cold metal, a grip worked with rubies that bit into his palm. He pulled, and a sword came out of the hat like the hat had only ever been a scabbard pretending to be cloth. And the length of it rang once against the air, a clean silver note that had no business in that room. He did not have time to be amazed. The basilisk found him by the ring of the blade. It reared. Even blinded, it lifted its ruined head above him, 20 feet of it, 30, he could not tell. A column of muscle the color of old bruises with 2 burst sockets weeping black. Its mouth opened. He saw the 2 fangs come down out of the pink dark of its palate, each one longer than his forearm, each one beaded at the tip with a drop of venom that caught the torchlight and looked absurdly beautiful. Harry did the only thing left. He set his feet, took the sword in both hands, and when the head came down at the sound of his heartbeat, he drove the point up into the roof of its open mouth. The fang went into his arm at the same moment. He felt the sword go home, felt the give, and then the grind as the blade split the soft palate and drove up into the brain case, and he felt the fang punch through his sleeve and into the meat of his forearm, and the 2 sensations arrived together and refused to be told apart. The basilisk's whole body clenched around a thing that was already dead. It fell sideways. It took the sword with it, wrenched from his hands, and it took the fang out of his arm on the way down. and it hit the flooded floor with a weight that threw water to the ceiling and put out 3 of the nearer torches. Harry sat down in the water because his legs had stopped being interested in the argument. His arm was on fire. Not fire. Ice that thought it was fire. The venom went up the vein toward his elbow, in a line he could trace with his elbow, in a line he could trace with his eyes, a cold black thread laid under the skin, and where it passed the world, lost some of its color. He looked at the fang lying broken in the water beside him. He looked at Riddle, who had stopped smiling. "To think," Riddle said softly, "the great Harry Potter dies of a serpent's bite, sitting in a puddle, 12 years old." "Funny," Harry said. His voice came out wrong, thick. "You're the one who looks worried." He was not brave in that moment. He wanted his mother, whom he could not remember, and he wanted the poison to hurt less, and he wanted very badly not to die on the floor of the thing that had killed him. But he had learned, over 11 years of cupboards, that the surest way to make Dudley stop hitting him was to refuse to give him the face he wanted. So he gave Riddle nothing. He held the cold in his arm, and he watched the boy who was not a boy, and he waited to see what the world would do next. The world did something he had no words for. It began behind his eyes. There was a pressure first. The kind that comes before a nosebleed, low and full in the bridge of the nose, in the sinus, in the roots of the teeth. Then a sound that was not a sound. A single clear tone the way a struck glass is clear, and the tone had the quality of a voice about to speak. The dying light of the chamber went strange. It did not dim. It sorted. Every wet surface, every ripple, every fold of Riddle's robes, and every hair on Ginny's spread head separated out into 100 degrees of not quite color, warm and cold, near and far, and laid itself before Harry in a way his eyes had never once shown him in 12 years of looking. And a voice spoke. Not in the chamber. In him. It did not echo, because there was nothing for it to echo off. It simply was, printed on the inside of his skull in a register that was calm to the point of cruelty, each word arriving whole and enormous and entirely without mercy. Bos Ezolid Zarbit Basilisk of Slytherin, Serpent King, eldest of the Viasel. Harry's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Classis, Apex Pyrdash, age 8, death 1060 years. Thrate Tier, the first of Manny. The words did not feel like a promise. They felt like a schedule. He would think later, in the safe gray days of the summer, that he ought to have been afraid at exactly this point, and that the failure to be afraid was itself the first sign of what had started. But in the moment there was no room for fear. The voice had opened a door in him, and something was coming through it, and there was only room for that. It came up through his poisoned arm. The cold black thread of venom which had been climbing toward his heart stopped. He felt it stop the way you feel a train stop, a lurch in the whole body. Then it reversed, not drained, not healed, claimed. The venom in his blood turned from a foreign thing killing him into a familiar thing belonging to him, and the fire went out of it and left behind a strange full coolness that spread from the wound outward into his chest and up his throat and behind his eyes, until Harry sat in the water with the serpent's death dissolving into him and understood, without being told, that basilisk venom would never hurt him again. Passive acquired, venom imindity, avthemnim, ivasemliter. The king's poison Kano's its own. Riddle had begun to speak. Harry could see his mouth moving. Could see the fury building in the too perfect face, but the words reached him late and thin, because the room had filled up with the other kind of seeing, and there was not much of Harry left over for ordinary sound. He was seeing the way the basilisk had seen. The dead thing lay across the chamber with a sword in its skull, and Harry could feel the shape of it in the dark without his eyes, a warm mass cooling, the heat leaking out of the great body into the cold water in slow tides. He could feel Ginny as a small failing warmth by the statue, her heat guttering low, but there. He could feel Riddle as an absence, a boy-shaped hole in the warmth of the world, a thing that gave off no heat at all because there was no life in it to give, and that, more than anything the diary had said, told Harry what Tom Riddle truly was. And under the chamber, and under the school, and out past the walls in the great sleeping dark, he could feel other warmths, small ones moving in the pipes, larger ones in the earth. The whole living map of the castle unrolled behind his eyes in reds and slow blues, and he was reading it the way he read a page. Easily, the way he had read nothing before in his life, and it should have been wonderful. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. That was the trouble. It was wonderful, and it was not his. "You are not listening to me," Riddle said, and the words finally reached Harry all at once, too loud. Riddle had raised his wand. He had taken it from the floor beside Ginny, the wand of a boy asleep in a hospital wing 40 years dead, and he was pointing it, and his knuckles where they closed on it were white with something that a bloodless thing should not have been able to feel. "What is happening to you?" It was, Harry thought afterward, the most honest question anyone had asked him all year, and it came from a memory in a book. "I don't know," Harry said. He got to his feet. He should not have been able to. The venom that had been killing him a minute before was simply gone, folded into him and turned to something else. And where he had expected weakness, there was instead a low singing strength that started in his arm and did not stop. He stood in the ruined chamber with the drowned torches guttering and the dead king cooling behind him. And he looked at Tom Riddle across the water, and for the length of one breath Harry saw him not, as a frightened second year would see him, but as the basilisk would have. A cold shape, A meatless thing wearing the outline of a boy. Prey that gave off no heat, which was to say, in the old grammar of the serpent, not quite real prey. A thing to be bitten only to be sure. Harry did not like the way he had just thought about a person. He put the thought away from him with an effort, the way you put down something hot, and the effort itself frightened him more than the thought had. Because it told him the thought had come from somewhere with its own weight. Somewhere new. Somewhere he had not agreed to house. Riddle's white hand tightened on the wand. "I have poured myself into that child for a year," he said, and now the smoothness was entirely gone, and what was underneath it was very old and very hungry. Her fear. Her secrets. Her silly little life. "I have grown solid on it. In minutes I will step out of that diary and out of her and into the world, and I will be more than a memory. And you, Harry Potter, will be a smear on Slytherin's floor that no one finds until June." He smiled again, but it did not fit right now, the way a coat does not fit over a wound. Whatever trick the serpent's death has played on you, it will not save you. There is nothing in this room that can save you. Fawkes dropped out of the dark. The phoenix came down between them, wings spread, and landed on Harry's wounded arm where the fang had gone in. The bird bent its head and wept, and its tears fell into the closing wound, and there was a warmth in that too, but a clean warmth. A warmth that belonged, and Harry realized he had been so full of the basilisk's cold new sense that he had almost forgotten what warmth of the ordinary kind felt like. The phoenix's tears did nothing to the venom, because the venom was already his now, but they closed the torn flesh and put the strength back into the muscle. And they did one thing more, that Harry felt very clearly. Where the tear touched the place the fang had gone in, the crowded new seeing dimmed. Just slightly, just there, like Fawkes was reminding some part of him that the eyes he had been born with also had their uses. Riddle watched the bird with an expression Harry could not read. "A phoenix," he said. "Dumbledore's pet, and a hat." He looked at the sword in the basilisk's skull, at the rubies in the hilt catching the drowned light. "This is what he sends to meet me. A songbird and an old hat and a boy who talks to snakes." He laughed, and the laugh was worse than the fury. "Do you understand yet, Harry, that you are alone? That there is no one coming? That the whole of Dumbledore's great affection for you amounts, in the hour of your death, to a bird and a piece of felt?" Harry looked at the diary. It lay open by Ginny's hand, and the basilisk's sense showed it to him as the strangest thing in a room full of strange things. Everything else in the chamber had a temperature. The stone was cold, the water colder, the dead king cooling, Ginny fading, Fawkes a small furnace of gold. But the diary had no temperature at all, and worse than that, around the diary the temperatures of everything else bent, the way heat haze bends the air over a summer road. It was drinking. He could feel it drinking. Every second the little book pulled a thread of warmth out of the girl on the floor, and out of the air and out, he suspected, of Riddle's own bloodless outline, feeding the memory, making it solid, and the more it drank, the more the boy-shaped hole in the world filled in around the edges and became real. It was, in its way, doing exactly what had just been done to Harry. That thought landed in him cold and clear and would not leave. Whatever the voice had done when the basilisk died, whatever the door in him had opened to let the serpent's death come through, it was the same shape as what the diary did. Take a warmth. Take a self. Make it yours. Grow solid on what used to belong to someone else. The voice had called it a boss soul, and had called it the first of many, and Harry stood in the drowned chamber with a phoenix on his arm and understood, in a wordless underneath the ribs way, that he had just been enrolled in something, and that Tom Riddle's diary was written in a related language. He did not have a plan. He had a fang. The broken basilisk fang lay in the water where it had come free of his arm, and Harry bent, and his hand closed on it, and it was warm in his grip in a way nothing venomous had any right to be. Warm because it was his now, the king's poison, knowing its own. He crossed the floor to the diary before Riddle could finish raising the wand. He was faster than he had been an hour ago. He was faster than a 12-year-old should be, and the speed came up his legs from the same low singing place the strength had. And he did not stop to be troubled by it, because there would be time to be troubled later, and there would not be time later to save Ginny Weasley. "No," said Riddle, and it was the first time all year the memory had sounded its age, which was to say, 16, which was to say, frightened. Harry drove the fang into the diary. Ink went up out of the book like blood out of an artery. It sprayed the walls, black and shining, and where it struck the water it did not mix but sat on the surface in slicks that steamed. Riddle threw his head back. The scream that came out of him was not a boy's scream and not a man's. It was the sound a thing makes when the warmth that stole is torn back out of it all at once, and Harry felt that too, felt the diary's terrible drinking reverse, felt every thread of stolen life snap loose and go rushing back where it belonged. Riddle's too solid outline came apart at the seams. Light poured out of the holes in him, and then the holes were most of him, and then he was a shape of tearing light standing over a schoolgirl, and then he was gone, and the screen cut off between one instant and the next like a door had been shut on it. The diary lay open and ruined, ink pouring from the twin holes the fang had made, and it had no temperature at all, and then it did. It went cold. Ordinary cold. Dead object cold. And the bent air around it straightened, and the warmth of the room settled back into its proper places, and behind the carved face of Salazar Slytherin the chamber, was, for the first time in 1,000 years, only a room. The voice did not speak. Harry noticed that, standing there with a dripping fang in his fist and the ink cooling on his hands. He had half expected it. He had half expected Boss Basilisk bed to print itself across the inside of his skull again, for the diary to be added to whatever ledger the serpent had been the first entry in, but there was nothing. Whatever had been in the diary was not a soul the way the basilisk had been a soul. It was a fragment, a copy, a photograph of himself. And when Harry destroyed it, there was nothing left over for the voice to claim. He was, he found, relieved, and then he was troubled that his relief had that particular shape, because it meant some part of him had been waiting, had been ready, had been almost willing to be given something more. Harry stood a moment longer with a ruined book in his hand and made himself take stock, the way he imagined a soldier might after a battle, counting what was left. His arm did not hurt. That was the first strange thing, and he turned it over in the torchlight, and there was a neat, closed pucker of skin where the fang had gone in and nothing else. No swelling, no black thread, no fire, only the neat scar. And under it, that low, full coolness that had spread from the wound and would not leave. His legs held him. His head was clear. He should, by every rule he understood, be dead on the floor, 12 years old. And instead he was standing, stronger than he had walked in, and the strength had a source, and the source was a 30-foot corpse behind him. And Harry made himself look at the exchange squarely and not flinch from it. He had traded a serpent's death for a serpent's life. Something had been taken from the world and put into him. That was the shape of it. He did not have a better word yet than the one the voice had given him, which was absorbed. And he did not like the word, and he could not unknow it. Ginny Weasley woke up with a gasp and immediately began to cry. Harry went to her. He knelt in the water and did not know what to do with his hands. So he put the fang down, and he said her name, and she looked at him with her face wet and terrified and said, "Harry, Harry, it was me. I opened the chamber. I didn't want to, I didn't mean to, I couldn't remember doing it, and then there'd be feathers on my robes, and I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." And it all came out of her in a flood, the whole miserable year. The diary that had listened, the diary that had answered, the diary that had used her hand to write on the walls in the blood of roosters. "It wasn't you," Harry said. "It was the book. The book made you. It's dead now. Look." He picked up the ruined diary and showed her the holes, the cold of it, the ink drying black and the folds of felt on the hat. She looked, and something in her face let go, and she cried harder, and that was better than the terror had been. So Harry let her. Over her shoulder, without meaning to, without looking, he felt Fawkes take wing again. Felt the small gold furnace of the bird lift off the drowned floor and circle the chamber once, and he felt something else too, and it was this that he would not tell anyone about for a long time. He felt the dead basilisk, not with his eyes. It lay in the dark across the chamber, cooling 30 feet of dead king, and Harry could feel the exact shape of it, the coil and heft, the ruined head, the place where the sword still stood in the skull. He could feel the cooling of it slowing as the great body gave up the last of its heat to the water. And under his feeling for the dead thing, faint, so faint he might have imagined it, he could feel something that was not heat and was not cold, and had no name in any language he knew, a kind of attention. As though the basilisk, being dead, being absorbed, being folded into him and turned to venom immunity and night sight and speed, had left behind in Harry not just its powers but a low residual awareness, an old cold patient watching, the watching of a thing that has spent 1,000 years in the dark waiting to be told to kill. It was not thinking about him. That was the important part, the part he held on to. It was not thinking about him. It was simply there, the way a great weight is there in a room even when you are not looking at it, and it had settled into a place low in him behind the ribs, and it was patient, and it was old, and it was now in some sense that the voice had made official. His. "Can you stand?" he asked Ginny. She could. He helped her up and gave her the ruined diary because she reached for it, because she needed to hold the dead thing that had used her and know it was dead. He picked up the sorting hat, from which the sword had come and into which it declined to return. So he left the sword where it was, standing in the skull of the Serpent King, a silver line in the dark that his new sense showed him as the coldest thing in the room now that the diary had gone quiet. They went back the way they had come, over the shed serpent skin the length of a train, under the tunnel where Lockhart sat grinning at the rockfall with the last of his memory gone, and Harry felt the whole way the low patient weight behind his ribs, keeping him company, seeing for him in the dark when the torches failed, and he told himself it was a gift, and he almost believed it. Fawkes carried them up. That was the part Harry could never afterward make sound true when he tried to tell it. The Phoenix let all of them take hold, Ginny and Harry and Ron, who was waiting white-faced at the rockfall, and Lockhart, who took hold of the tail feathers grinning and said what marvelous plumage, and the bird rose up the long black plait pulling 4 people behind it like 4 people weighed nothing, and it sang the whole way, and the song went into Harry and did the thing it had done in the chamber. It dimmed the new sense. Not off, down. While the Phoenix sang, Harry saw with his own ordinary eyes, felt with his own ordinary skin, and the low patient weight behind his ribs seemed to sink deeper and go quiet, and for the length of the song he was only Harry, 12, filthy, alive, rising up out of the dark under the school with his friends. Then they came up through the sink in Myrtle's bathroom into torchlight and cold, ordinary air, and Fox lifted off Harry's shoulder to circle the ceiling, and the song thinned, and the moment it thinned, the new sense came back up, like water into a footprint, and Harry felt the warmth of the castle unroll around him again, and he understood that the Phoenix's song had not been curing him of anything. It had only been holding the door shut, and a door that has to be held shut is a door that wants to be open. Ginny ran to her mother. There was a great deal of crying, and Professor McGonagall standing very straight with her hand pressed to her mouth, and Dumbledore in the doorway with his half-moon glasses catching the torchlight and his eyes going over the whole scene once, quickly, the way a man counts to be sure everyone is alive. His gaze reached Harry and stopped. Harry felt it stop. That was the thing. He felt Dumbledore's attention land on him the way he had felt the diary drinking, a pressure without a temperature, and he understood in the instant it landed that Dumbledore had noticed something, not the ink on his hands, not the tear in his sleeve where the fang had gone in and Fox had wept it closed. Something under that. The old man's blue eyes went to Harry's eyes and held there a beat longer than a relieved headmaster's eyes should hold, and in that beat, Harry had the distinct and unwelcome sensation of being read the way he had spent the last half hour, reading the room. Then Dumbledore smiled, and the moment folded away, and he said, "First, I want to say thank you," and the ordinary machinery of rescue closed over the strangeness and hid it. But Harry had felt it land, and he had felt, low behind his ribs, the old cold patient weight stir once when Dumbledore looked at him, the way a guard dog lifts its head at a footstep and settle again. It had a sense of its own, the weight. It had noticed being noticed. And Harry, 12 years old, filthy, alive, standing in a bathroom that smelled of drains and Phoenix, understood for the first time that whatever had come through the door the voice opened was going to be with him from now on, and that it watched what watched him. He said nothing about the voice. He told the true story with one thread pulled out of it. The basilisk, the sword, the fang, the diary, riddle, Ginny. All true. He left out the tone that had printed itself in his skull and the ledger it had opened, and the way he had seen the room in warmths and the low weight behind his ribs, because he did not have words for it yet that would not make him sound mad, and because some cautious animal part of him which he was not sure was entirely his own animal part anymore, advised him strongly to keep it. He would tell Dumbledore, he decided, when he understood it, when he had words. Not yet. Later, they gave the diary to Dumbledore, and Harry watched the old man turn it over in his long fingers, the ruined book with the fang holes in it, ink dried to a crust, and he watched Dumbledore's face while he did it. And there was a great deal happening in that face that Harry could not read even with the new sense, because Dumbledore, it turned out, gave off almost as little as Tom Riddle had, a stillness so complete it was nearly a coldness, and that frightened Harry in a way he did not let himself examine. "You destroyed this," Dumbledore said. It was not quite a question. With the fang. From the basilisk. Harry hesitated. The voice's silence when the diary died was the one clean fact he had, the one thing about the whole afternoon that seemed to mean something he could nearly grasp. It didn't. When it died, sir, it didn't feel like anything. Not like... He stopped. Dumbledore looked at him over the half-moon glasses. "Not like the serpent," he said. Harry's mouth went dry. He had not said the serpent had felt like anything. He had described the fight, the sword up through the mouth, the venom, the phoenix tears. He had not said one word about the voice, or the ledger, or the low patient weight. And Dumbledore had looked at him and said, "Not like the serpent," and left it in the air between them like a hand held out. For a long moment, Harry stood on the edge of it. The whole of the afternoon rose up in him wanting to be spoken. The tone in his skull, the warmth, the door that wanted to be open, the old cold watching that was now official, was now his, was now the first of many. He could put it into this old man's hands. That was what the old man was doing, holding out his hand, giving Harry the chance to put it down. Behind his ribs, the weight stirred, not a word, not a thought. A pressure, low and cool, the exact pressure he had felt the venom make when it climbed his arm toward his heart and then stopped and reversed and became his. It did not want him to speak. It did not have wants, he told himself. It was a residue, a leftover, a dead king's echo. It did not want anything, but the pressure was there, cool and patient and certain, and under it Harry heard himself say, "It felt like winning, sir. That's all. It felt like not dying." Dumbledore held his eyes a moment more. Then he nodded, slowly, and set the diary down on the desk between them, and the moment when Harry might have told him closed like water over a stone and did not open again for a long time. "Go to bed, Harry," Dumbledore said gently. "You have earned it, and there is a feast, and you have missed a great deal of sleep for a boy of 12. He paused with his hand on the ruined diary. "If anything should trouble you, in the days to come, anything at all, however strange, however small, my door is not often locked." "Yes, sir," Harry said. He went to the door. His hand was on the cold brass of it when Dumbledore spoke again, lightly, like it was an afterthought, a thing of no weight at all. "The eyes?" Dumbledore said. Harry turned. "Forgive an old man's curiosity," Dumbledore said. He had not moved. He stood behind his desk with his hands folded and the ruined diary between them and the silver instruments whirring softly on their spindly tables, and his blue eyes rested on Harry with an expression of mild, terrible interest. Your mother had your eyes. Green, the particular green of a spring leaf held to the light. I have remarked on it before. I hope you will not think me foolish if I tell you that just now, in a certain light, they seem to me a slightly different green. A colder green. The green, one might almost say, of something looking up from the bottom of a very deep and very still pool. He smiled. The torchlight in that dreadful bathroom, no doubt. It plays tricks. Good night, Harry. Harry did not answer. He went out and shut the door, and stood in the stone corridor with his heart doing something he had no name for. And he lifted his hand and pressed his fingertips under his own eyes, against the bone, as though he could feel through the skin whether the color there had changed. He could not, of course, but behind his ribs the low cold Wade was very still and very awake and very pleased, and Harry stood in the corridor and understood that Dumbledore had seen it looking out, and that the Wade had seen Dumbledore seeing, and that from now on he was going to have to be careful about what looked out of his own face. He did not go straight to the feast. He found instead an empty classroom 2 corridors from Dumbledore's office. A disused one with the desk stacked and a smell of chalk and mouse, and he shut the door and stood in the dark with his back against it, and made himself think about the voice on purpose. It had spoken 4 times. Twice in the chamber, when the Basilisk died. Once as a warning, when the diary would not be claimed, except that had been a silence and not a speaking, and once at the feast, though the feast had not happened yet, and Harry pushed that thought away because it made no sense, and there were more useful things to work out first. He wanted to know if he could call it. Everything else in his life that had power in it answered to a word or a wand motion or a knock on a door. He did not see why a voice in his own skull should be different. And he had learned young that the fastest way to find the shape of a thing was to push on it and see where it gave. He thought deliberately the way you point at something, status. Nothing happened. The classroom stayed a classroom. He tried it aloud, whispering, feeling foolish, and still nothing. And he was about to give it up as the sort of idea that only works in the daft comics Dudley left in the wastebasket, when he stopped whispering and stopped thinking words at all, and instead did the thing he had done without deciding to in the chamber, the thing that had come up his poisoned arm. He reached for the low cold weight behind his ribs. He turned his attention on it the way you turn your face toward a sound. The voice answered at once, and the darkness of the classroom filled up with pale letters that were not light, because they cast no light on the stacked desks, and were not memory, because he could read them the way you read a page and not the way you read a page, and not the way you recall one. Stat US. Host, Hera James Potter, AG 12, Condition 12, Condition Stable, Integration 3%. The number sat there, calm and enormous, and Harry did not know what it was, 3%. The number sat there, calm and enormous, and Harry did not know what it was 3% of, and did not like any of the answers he could invent. Basilisk of Slytherin, Serpent King. Passives active, Venom immunity, absolute. H sight, waking. Hunting speed, partial. T.O. wake, the gazee. Selame more. Harry read the dormant line twice. The voiceless gaze. He knew, without the voice explaining, exactly what that was, and the knowing came up out of the cold weight fully formed. A thing he had inherited along with the venom in the sight. The basilisk's killing stare. The look that turned the living to stone or worse. It was in him. It was only sleeping. And the voice was telling him, in its calm, merciless way, that the road to waking it was more. He had come into the room to find the shape of the voice by pushing on it. He had found it. The shape was an invitation, endlessly patient, and the invitation was always the same. He thought a question at it. Hard the way he had reached, "What are you?" The pale letters held for a moment, and then, for the first time, they did something other than answer. You and recognisid query. The answer is not yet unlocked. Slam more. He tried again. Who made you? Where did you come from? Why me? Each time the same reply printed itself, unhurried, immovable, a locked door with a price written on it. Claim more. Claim more. The voice would tell him what it was. It would tell him where it came from and why it had chosen the one boy in Britain who talked to snakes. It would tell him all of it, but it would only tell him after. And after meant more souls, more low cold weights settling in behind his ribs, more of the road that started in a drowned chamber and ran off into a dark he could not see the end of. Harry let the letters go. They did not fade so much as stop being attended to, the way a sound stops when you turn your face away, and the classroom was only a classroom again. Chalk and mouse and stacked desks and a 12-year-old with his back against the door. He had wanted to know if he could call it. He could. That was the answer, and it was worse than a no would have been, because a thing you can call is a thing you will call. Some tired night, some frightened night, some night when the low cold weight is patient and the road is right there and the price does not seem like very much. He knew that about himself the way he knew he would eat the second chicken leg. He put his hand on the cold brass of the door, and he made himself a promise that he was not sure he had the standing to keep, which was that he would learn what the voice was before he paid it another thing. Then he went out into the corridor, and the promise was already an hour old and feeling its age, and he went instead to a window, one of the tall narrow ones in the corridor above the entrance hall, and he looked out at the grounds in the dark. The moon was down. The lake was a black nothing, the forest a blacker nothing beyond it, and the ordinary human eye should have shown Harry only those two nothings, and the faint gray of the lawn between them. It showed him more than that. It showed him the forest breathing. Warmths moved in it, dozens of them, hundreds, small quick heats near the eaves and larger slow heats deeper in, a whole living country of temperature unrolling behind the dark, and Harry stood at the window and read it as easily as a page, the herd of somethings at the tree line, the single large slow heat pacing along the shore of the lake, the vast cold coil of the water where nothing more moved at all. He had never seen the grounds like this. No human had. It was the most beautiful and the most wrong thing he had ever looked at, and he could not stop looking. And behind his ribs the old cold weight looked with him, patient, pleased, at home. A voice at his shoulder said, "There you are." Harry turned too fast. Ron stood there, freckled and exhausted and alive, holding two chicken legs he had clearly liberated from the feast, and offering one. "You vanished," Ron said. "Mum wants to hug you again, fair warning. What are you looking at?" Harry looked back at the window. The grounds were dark. Only dark. He made himself see only the dark, made himself push the warmths down the way Fox's song had pushed them down, and it took an effort that put sweat on his lip, and it worked, mostly, and the forest went back to being a black nothing beyond a black lake. "Nothing," Harry said, and took the chicken leg. "Just the forest. Come on, I'm starving." That much was true. He was starving. He was, in fact, hungrier than he had ever been in his life. Hungry in a low, full way that started behind his ribs, and he ate the chicken leg to the bone as they walked, and then he ate Ron's. And Ron laughed and said, "Blimey, save some for the feast," and Harry laughed too. It was a real laugh. He was alive, and his friend was alive, and Ginny was alive, and the thing under the school was dead, and there was food, and there was going to be more food, and he was 12, and it had been the worst and best day of his life. Only, as they came down the moving stairs toward the noise and gold light of the great hall, Harry caught his own reflection in the dark glass of a portrait's frame. Just for a moment. Just in passing. And the eyes that looked back at him out of the glass were green, the particular green of a spring leaf. His mother's green, except at the very center, right at the pupil, where, if he did not know better, if the light were not playing tricks, he might have said there was a second color looking up, colder, older, from a long way down. It was gone when he turned his head to see it properly. It was only ever there when he was not looking. He put his shoulder into the doors of the great hall, and the warmth and the noise took him, and Dumbledore was standing to announce that exams were cancelled, and everyone was cheering, and Hagrid came in late and huge and forgiven, and there was more cheering. And Harry sat down between Ron and Hermione, unpetrified Hermione, who threw her arms around him and then went pink and shook his hand instead, and for a few hours he let all of it be the whole of the world. Hermione watched him eat. He noticed it the third time she did it, over the top of a goblet she was not really drinking from, and when he caught her at it, she did not look away the way people do when they are caught. She held his eyes and then she looked, very deliberately, at his plate, which he had cleared 4 times, and then back at his face, and one of her eyebrows went up a fraction. "What?" Harry said, around a mouthful. "Nothing," Hermione said. "You're just very hungry." "I nearly got eaten. I've earned it." "You have." She turned her goblet in her fingers. "It's only that when I was petrified, Harry, I could still hear. Some of it. It's a horrible thing. Being stone, you can't move and you can't shut your eyes and you hear people talking about you as though you're furniture." She said it lightly, but she was watching him the whole time, the way she watched a difficult passage in a book that she suspected of hiding something. "And I've been thinking about the basilisk, about what it must have been like to be that, 1,000 years in the pipes with nothing to do but wait and be hungry. I keep imagining the hunger. It must have been the loudest thing in the world, by the end. Louder than the waiting, even." She set the goblet down. "You'd tell me, if anything was wrong, wouldn't you?" It was not quite a question, the way Dumbledore's had not been. "Course," Harry said, and reached for the treacle tart, and the low, cold weight behind his ribs was very still while he lied to her, still and patient and pleased, and the treacle tart was the best thing he had ever eaten, and he could have eaten 6 of them, and he stopped at 1 because Hermione was watching, and he was suddenly, coldly, aware of exactly how it would look to keep going, but he did not look at the tall, dark windows along the wall of the Great Hall, because he knew what they would show him if he did, the whole breathing country of the grounds enrolled in warmths, and he did not want to know how easy it would be, how comfortable, how much like coming home, and once near the end, when the puddings came out and everyone was laughing, Harry went still with a forkful halfway to his mouth, because he had felt, low behind his ribs, the old cold patient weight lift its head, not at anything in the hall, at the doors, at the tall dark windows and the grounds beyond them and the breathing forest and the black cold coil of the lake, the way a guard dog lifts its head, the way a hunter comes awake, as though, out there in the dark that Harry was refusing to look at, something had looked back. He set his fork down. He turned his head slowly toward the nearest tall window, and he let himself see, just for a second, just enough. The grounds unrolled. The forest breathed, and down at the black edge of the black lake, where a single large slow heat had been pacing the shore all evening, the heat had stopped pacing. It stood at the waterline, and it was facing the castle. And Harry, reading it as easily as a page, understood two things at once and did not like either of them. The first was that the heat was too big and the wrong shape for anything he had a name for. The second was that behind his ribs the old cold weight had gone from patient to eager, and it was pointing him at the thing on the shore the way a compass points north. And the voice, silent since the chamber, since the first of many, chose that moment to speak again, one line, printed calm and enormous and without mercy on the inside of his skull, so that Harry sat frozen with the noise of the feast washing over him and the pudding going cold on his plate. Proximity detect. Ewan claimed soul within range. Tyre, son of a Kent, do you wish to humphick? Do you wish to hunt? Harry closed his eyes. Down behind his ribs, patient, old, certain, the weight that used to be a king waited for his answer. And the terrible thing, the thing he would not tell Ron or Hermione or Dumbledore, the thing he could barely tell himself as the gold light and the laughter broke over him, was that for one whole second, before he found the will to think no, before he found the bull to think no, before he found the boy in himself under the growing cold, part of Harry Potter had already, gladly, silently, begun to answer yes. Chapter 1, End. Chapter 2, The Thing That Ate the Cold Number. Harry thought it at the feast with the pudding going cold on his plate and the whole gold noise of the hall washing over him, and the voice took the word the way still water takes a stone, without argument, and the pale line printed on the inside of his skull changed. Haunt Declant, the soul remains unclaimed. The affer does not expire. Out on the black shore of the black lake, the large, slow heat stood a moment longer facing the castle, and then it turned and went back into the water, unhurried, and the surface closed over it without a ripple that Harry could read. He never learned what it was. A merperson grown old and huge, perhaps, or the thing the students called the giant squid, or something with no name that lived under Hogwarts and came up on warm nights to look at the lights. It did not matter. What mattered was the sentence the voice had left him with, and Harry carried it out of the hall and up to the tower and into the summer, and he turned it over so many times that it wore smooth. The offer does not expire. That was the whole of the trouble in the end. Not that the road was dark, that the road was always open and would wait for him patiently forever. He spent the summer at Privet Drive learning to say no. It was harder than it sounds. The heat sight would not switch off. He woke on the first morning of the holidays with the sense already running. The whole of number 4 unrolled around him in warmth before he had opened his eyes. Uncle Vernon, a red bulk of sleeping bad temper down the hall. Aunt Petunia, thinner and cooler beside him. Dudley, an enormous, slow furnace 3 rooms away, and out in the gardens of Privet Drive the small, quick heats of birds and cats, and once, memorably, a hedgehog under the hydrangeas that Harry watched for 20 minutes with a feeling he did not examine. He could not turn it off. He could only turn away from it, push it down the way Fox's song had pushed it down, and holding it down took a low, steady effort that never entirely stopped, so that all summer, Harry felt as though he were leaning on a door in another room while trying to have a conversation in this one. The hunger was worse than the sight. He ate everything the Dursleys allowed him, which was not much, and it was never enough, and the hunger had a shape now that it had not had before, a low, cold fullness behind the ribs that food touched but did not satisfy, because it was not, he came to understand, hunger for food. It was the other hunger. It was the offer that did not expire, wearing the mask of an ordinary boy's empty stomach, and Harry learned to know the difference by the temperature of it, and to feed the food hunger and starve the other one, and it was the hardest thing he had ever made himself do, and no one knew he was doing it. He learned the rules of the voice, the way you learn the rules of a house you've been locked in. It answered when he reached for it, and not when he fought at it in words. It would tell him what he had and what he could do, and it would not tell him what it was. The integration number climbed very slowly, without his claiming anything, from 3% to 5, and when he demanded to know what was integrating into what, the answer was always the locked door with the price on it, slam warm. He came to suspect that integration was simply time, that the basilisk's soul was settling into him the way a stain settles into wood, deeper the longer it sat, and that the number would go on climbing whether he fed it or not, and that thought kept him awake more nights than the hunger did. He tried once to tell someone. He wrote 3 lines of a letter to Dumbledore, sitting on the floor of his room at 2 a.m. with Hedwig watching him from the wardrobe, and he got as far as, "There is a voice, and I think it is making me into something," and then he stopped, because the low, cold weight behind his ribs had gone very still, the particular stillness it had, the pleased stillness, and Harry understood that some part of what he was becoming did not want the letter sent, and that he could not any longer be sure which of his own reluctances were his. He burned the 3 lines in the candle. He told himself he would go to Dumbledore in person, at school, where a voice could not talk him out of it. He almost believed it. Then Aunt Marge came to stay, and Harry nearly killed her. That was not how the family told it afterward, in the frightened hush before he ran. The family told it that the boy had done something freakish, that Marge had swelled up like a monstrous balloon and floated off the garden, and had to be fetched down by the accidental magic reversal squad and obliviated. And that was true as far as it went. What the family did not know was how close it had come to being something that could not be reversed. Marge had been drinking, and she had been talking all through dinner about breeding, about bad blood, about how you saw it in dogs and you saw it in people, how a runt from a bad litter should be drowned early and kindly rather than let grow up to disappoint everyone. She talked about Harry's father as a drunk and a layabout, and his mother is no better than she should be. And Harry sat with his hands flat on the table and said nothing, the way he had learned to say nothing, the way he had learned to say nothing, giving her no face to feed on. And behind his ribs the low, cold weight lifted its head. It did not lift its head at Marge's cruelty. That was the thing that frightened him for weeks afterward. It lifted its head at the wine warmth of her, at the slow red heat of a large, slow animal that had made itself prey by turning its unguarded back on a hungry thing, and Harry felt the voiceless gaze stir behind his eyes for the first time since the chamber, felt it come up out of the dark where it slept, felt the pressure gather in the bridge of his nose and the roots of his teeth, and he understood with a horrible flat certainty that if he looked at Aunt Marge in that moment, if he let his eyes meet hers and did nothing to stop what wanted to happen, she would not upswell it happened. She would go gray. She would go still. She would go to stone from the inside, and it would not be an accident, and it would not be irreversible, and the last thing she would ever see would be the color looking up out of the bottom of the pool. Harry shut his eyes. He shut them hard, and he thought no with everything he had, and the accidental magic that had been building in him all along. The ordinary underage wizard rage that any 12 going on 13 boy might feel, boiled over sideways instead, harmlessly, stupidly. And Aunt Marge inflated like a monstrous balloon, and rose off her chair bellowing while Uncle Vernon Dudley screamed, and the good china broke. It was a disaster. It was the best disaster of Harry's life, because it was the one that happened instead of the other one. He was out of the house within the hour with his trunk and his owl and his wand, walking blind through the dark of Little Winging, shaking, and behind his ribs the low, cold weight had settled again. Patient, unbothered, faintly and horribly satisfied, like it had enjoyed being asked and did not mind being refused, because the offer did not expire and there would be other nights. He walked a long way in the dark before the bus came, and it was the walking that frightened him more than the near thing at the table. Because as he walked, he kept turning it over, and every time he turned it over, he found the same splinter. He had not been angry at Marge for insulting his parents. Or he had. The ordinary boy in him had been, hot and sick and helpless. But the thing that had woken behind his ribs and reached for the gaze had not cared about the insult at all. It had cared about the wine warmth of her, the fat, slow, unguarded heat of her, and it had wanted to take her not as revenge but as food. And it had been, in the wanting, entirely calm. Rage he could have forgiven himself. Rage was human. What sat in him now on the dark suburban pavement, replaying the moment his own eyes had wanted to open, was not rage. It was appetite, and it had worn his rage as a doorway, and Harry walked past the sleeping houses of Little Winging, and understood that he could no longer be sure when he felt a thing, whose feeling it was underneath. The night bus found him purple and violent and took him to London. Nobody expelled him. The Minister for Magic himself was strangely, sweatily kind about the whole thing, which Harry was too rattled to find as odd as it was. He spent the last fortnight of summer at the Leaky Cauldron in Diagon Alley, free, unwatched, eating 3 proper meals a day, more than the Dursleys had ever set in front of him, and finding that 3 proper meals a day did nothing at all for the other hunger, and it was there, in the second-hand bookshop 2 doors down from Flourish and Blott's, that he began, at last, to investigate. He did not know the name of the thing that had happened to him. So he looked up the things around the edges of it. He read about basilisks, and learned nothing he did not already know in his blood. He read about the transfer of magical power between creatures, and found a great deal of confident nonsense and one careful old book that said the subject was forbidden for reasons the author declined to print. He read about soul magic, which the shopkeeper did not want to sell him, and sold him anyway when Harry paid double, and that book he read 3 times, sitting up in his room over the leaky cauldron with a candle, and it frightened him more than anything in the chamber had, because the book said that the soul was not a metaphor, that it was a real thing, with weight and edges, and that it could be split, which the book called the darkest of all magics and would not describe, and that it could be moved, and that it could, under conditions the book said had not been achieved in recorded history, be taken, consumed, added. The book called the last of these the accretion, and said it was theoretical, and said that in theory a self that accreted the souls of others would grow in power without limit, and would also, the book said in a single dry sentence that Harry read a dozen times, cease within a predictable span to be the self that it had been at the start, cease to be the self that it had been at the start. Harry sat with that sentence and the candle and the small quick heats of the mice in the walls of the leaky cauldron, and for the first time he had a word for the number. Integration. It was not the basilisk integrating into him. It was him, integrating into the thing the voice was building. 3%, 5%, slowly, the whole time, whether he fed it or not. He closed the book. He did not sleep. In the morning he bought the book, because a thing you understand is better than a thing you fear, and he packed it at the bottom of his trunk under his robes where no one would find it, and he went down to breakfast and ate everything on the table and remained hungry, and the next day he took the train back to school. He spent the last week of the summer, in between the books, learning the rest of the voice's shape, because he had decided that fear was a poor map, and knowledge was a better one, and he was going to walk into whatever was coming with as good a map as he could draw. He learned that the voice kept a ledger, and that the ledger had more than a status page in it. He found this by reaching for it in a particular impatient way one night and thinking hard, "Show me everything." And the pale letters that answered him were headed with a word that turned his stomach, even as some cold part of him leaned toward it with interest. Bestiary. Soul slammed 1. Souls within range 1 claimed 14. 14. Harry sat very still on the floor of his room over the leaky cauldron with London muttering below the window and read that number and made himself understand it. Diagon Alley was full of people, hundreds of them, thousands, and the voice did not count people. It counted souls within range, and it meant a particular thing by that, and the particular thing was not human beings. He reached again, carefully, the way you lift the corner of a bandage to see how bad it is, and the letters unfolded, and each of the 14 was a creature, not a person, a thing the ledger judged worth the taking. A pair of Akamis in a cage 2 streets over. A very old cat in the apothecary that was, the ledger noted without emphasis, not entirely a cat. A boggart in a wardrobe in the flat above the joke shop. A caged thing in the back of Nocturne Alley that the ledger described in 3 words Harry made himself read and then wished he had not. 14 of them. And beside each one, the same offer. The offer that did not expire, printed patient and enormous and without weight, as though it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Do you wish to hunt? Harry closed the bestiary. He was getting better at that, at turning his face away from the letters so that they stopped being attended to. And he sat in the dark and worked out what the bestiary told him about the shape of the thing that had him, which was more than he wanted to know. It told him the voice was not passive. It was not merely something that had happened to him in a chamber and would now sit quietly and grow. It was scanning, always, everywhere he went without his asking. It was reading the world for souls worth the taking and keeping a list and holding out the offer. 14 times over, in a city he had come to for safety. It was hunting for him while he slept. All it needed from Harry was the one word, the yes, and it did not need that word urgently because it had all the time there was and the offer did not expire. He did not say yes to any of the 14. He was proud of that, in a thin, exhausted way, in the last week of the summer. He would think about it later, after the train, and take no comfort from it at all, because he came to understand that the summer had been the easy part. In the summer, the souls on offer had been a boggart in a wardrobe and a cat that was not a cat. Things it cost him nothing to refuse. The voice had been teaching him all summer the shape of refusal, letting him practice on easy things, building the habit, and Harry had mistaken the practice for a victory. He had not yet been offered anything he wanted. He had not yet been in a doorway on a stopped train with his mother's voice going out of him into the dark, with a rival hunger reaching into him, with no time to think and no word required. He had spent the summer learning to say no to things that did not matter. And the thing that mattered, when it came, did not ask. The train was where the second one found him. It was not the giant heat from the lake. Harry would think about that afterward, about how he had spent all summer bracing for the offer to come dressed as temptation, as a thing on a dark shore that he had to be strong enough to refuse. He had made himself ready to say no. He had not made himself ready for a thing that did not ask. It came aboard the Hogwarts Express in the gray light of the afternoon while rain ran sideways across the windows, and the train stood shuddering to a halt in the middle of nowhere. And Harry felt it before anyone else in the compartment stirred, because Harry felt everything before anyone else now. He felt the cold first. Not the cold of the rain. The other cold. The wrong cold. The cold he had felt only once before and had spent all summer trying to forget. The cold that came off Tom Riddle's diary. Off the boy-shaped hole in the warmth of the world. This was that, but moving and vast and hungry in a way the diary had only sipped at. The lamps in the compartment guttered. Ice bloomed on the inside of the glass in ferns and feathers. And down the corridor of the train, sliding, unhurried, came a thing that had no heat of its own at all. A thing so cold that it was not an absence of warmth but an active drinking of it. A wound in the world in the rough shape of a cloaked man, and everywhere it passed the warmths of the living dimmed and shrank and pulled in on themselves in terror. Ron said in a small voice, "What's happening?" And Hermione had gone white, and the man asleep in the corner of the compartment, the shabby one in the patched robes with the name R.J. Shea, L.U. pin on his battered case, stirred but did not wake, and Harry stood up. He did not decide to stand up. His legs stood him up, the way they had stood him up in the chamber over the sword, the low singing strength coming into them, and behind his ribs the cold weight that used to be a king came fully, terribly awake, and pointed. The compartment door slid open. The Dementor filled it. There is no way to describe a Dementor to someone who has not stood in front of one, because the Dementor does not present a thing to your eyes so much as it removes things from your mind, and what Harry saw was less a shape than a subtraction. A tall, drowned darkness under a hood, one gray hand showing at the sleeve, scabbed and glistening, and the sound it made was the worst of it, a long dragging rattle of a breath drawn in and never let out. The sound of a thing breathing at that head at Harry Kwan in it. The cold came down on Harry like water closing over a head. And in the cold, the whispers began. He would not be able to explain it to anyone. Ron heard nothing but the rattle. Hermione heard nothing but the rattle. But Harry, who carried a claimed soul behind his ribs, who had a door in him that the voice had opened and that would not fully close, heard the Dementor's indrawn breath resolve as it reached him into voices. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Faint and layered and drowning, the way a great crowd sounds through deep water. And every one of them was the last thought of a soul the Dementor had taken, preserved in the cold of it, the way a fly is preserved in ice, and they were all still, faintly, forever, screaming. It reached for him. The gray hand came up. The breath drew in, and Harry felt his own warmth begin to go. Felt the good pulled out of him in a long sucking rush. His mother's voice that he had heard once before at the edge of a Dementor and would hear again. The green light. The high, cold laughing, all of it rising up out of him toward the drinking dark. He was going. He could feel himself going. And the low, cold weight behind his ribs, the Serpent King, the eldest of the voiceless, chose that moment to do the thing it had been made for. It did not defend him. Harry understood that even as it happened, and the understanding was the coldest thing in the whole cold afternoon. The Basilisk soul did not rise up to protect Harry from the thing that was eating him. It rose up because here, at last, was another apex thing, a rival predator, a soul worth taking. And the offer did not expire, and the voice had asked at the feast and been told no. But the voice was not asking now. The voice was not asking anyone. The two hungers met in the doorway of a train compartment, the drowned cold reaching into Harry to feed, and the old cold king reaching out of Harry to claim, and for one endless instant they were locked together, drinking each other, and Harry hung between them like a rope in a tug of war with no idea which end was going to win, and no longer entirely sure which end was him. Then the balance tipped. He never knew afterward whether it tipped because of what he was or because of what he chose. He knew only that in the drowning instant, with his mother's voice going out of him toward the dark, he reached the way he had reached in the chamber for the fang, and he took hold of the drinking cold, not to push it away but to pull it in. And the door in him that the voice had opened swung wide, and the Dementor, which had spent an age of the world drinking the souls of the living, and had never once in that age met a living thing that drank back, poured into Harry Potter all at once like a river going down a drain. There was a moment inside the pouring that lasted no time at all and also lasted years. Harry was in the doorway of the compartment, and he was also nowhere, down in a gray, drowned country between two hungers, and he could feel the Dementor as it truly was for the first time. Not a monster, but an appetite that had forgotten it was ever anything else. A thing so old and so starved that it had eaten its own name 100 lifetimes ago and gone on eating, and he could feel the Basilisk King in him reach for it, cold and delighted, the way one old thing greets another, and he understood that the two of them, the Devourer and the Serpent, were not so different, and that the place in Harry where they met and mingled and became his was not a small dark closet behind the ribs anymore. It had a floor and walls now. It was becoming a room. And there was space in the room, Harry felt with a lurch. For a great deal more than two, the voice spoke, and it was louder than it had ever been, loud enough that Harry's teeth ached with it. Boss, as a well absorbed, a demonor of Azkaban, namsless, as all of them are nameless, classed, devorder, age death nunig or great, thrate tier, signer nevigant, warning, death act, warning, this soul is not empty. The lamps flared up. The ice on the windows cracked and ran. The cold went out of the air all at once, and where the Dementor had filled the doorway there was nothing. No cloak, no drowned dark, no scabbed gray hand. Nothing at all, only the corridor and the rain and the shabby man in the corner who had come awake at last and was on his feet with his wand out and the look on his face that Harry, even half drowned and reeling, recognized as wrong, because Lupin's wand was up and half raised in the beginning of a spell, and there was nothing to cast it at, and Lupin was staring at the empty doorway, and then at Harry, and the something in his face was not relief. Dementors did not simply leave. Harry did not know that yet, but Lupin knew it the way he knew his own name. And Lupin was looking at the child standing white and swaying in the middle of the compartment where a Dementor had been a heartbeat ago, and was now not, and Lupin was afraid, and he was trying very hard not to show a compartment full of children that he was afraid. Here, Lupin said, and his voice was steady even if his face was not. He broke a bar of chocolate into pieces with hands that were almost steady too, and pressed a piece into Harry's hand, and pieces on Ron and Hermione. Eat it. All of it. It helps. He looked to the doorway again. He looked back at Harry. You should sit down, he said gently. And there was a question folded up inside the gentleness that he was not going to ask in front of the others. You've gone a very strange color. Harry sat down. He ate the chocolate. It was, he distantly noticed, the first thing he had eaten all summer that touched the other hunger, that put warmth into the cold place behind his ribs where the food hunger never reached. And he understood why a moment later and wished he had not, because the chocolate did not fill the cold place. It only reminded the cold place, briefly, of what warmth was, the way the Phoenix song had. And under the ordinary sweetness of it, quietly, growing, Harry heard the whispers. They were his now. That was what the voice had warned him. This soul is not empty. The Dementor had spent an age of the world drinking, and everything it had drunk it had kept. The way the cold keeps a fly, and Harry had drunk the Dementor, and so now, behind his ribs, alongside the old cold patient king, there was a crowd. Thousands of them, the last thoughts of the drowned. They were faint. They were far down, under deep water, layered and drowning and still, forever, faintly screaming, but they were there, and they were, the voice had made it official, his. Hermione was saying something, Ron was saying something, the train was moving again, jolting forward into the rain, and the ordinary world was closing back over the strangeness the way it always did. Chocolate and worry, and are you all right, Harry? You fainted, you went rigid, and your eyes rolled back, and Harry said, yes, I'm fine, it just got to me, the cold. And he let them believe it because it was easier than the truth, and because the low, cold weight behind his ribs was pleased that he was lying, and he had stopped being able to tell, entirely, whether the Ease Heltae was howled hen and he had cited as it, but Lupin did not believe it. Harry could feel the man watching him for the rest of the journey, over a book Lupin was not reading, with an expression that Harry had no name for and did not like. An expression that had a question in it, and, under the question, a slowly settling dread. And once, near the end, when the lights of Hogsmeade Station came up gold and rain-blurred in the windows, and Ron and Hermione were pulling on their cloaks, Lupin leaned across the compartment and said, quietly, so that only Harry could hear it under the noise of the arrival, "Where did it go, Harry?" Harry looked at him. "The Dementor," Lupin said. His voice was very kind and very level, and his eyes did not move from Harry's face. "They don't leave, not when they've found something they want. Not for a locked door, or a raised wand, or a compartment full of frightened children. They leave when the Ministry calls them off. And the Ministry did not call that one off. And I was awake in time to see that there was nothing to drive away." He paused. He was choosing his words the way a man chooses his footing on ice. It found what it wanted, and then it was not there anymore. I have hunted these things and studied them, and I have never once in my life seen one simply cease. So I am asking you, and I will only ask once, and I will believe whatever you tell me. Where did it go? The whole train shuddered to a stop. Doors banged. The corridor filled with noise and children and steam, and Harry Potter sat in the compartment with chocolate on his tongue and a drowned choir behind his ribs and an old cold king keeping it company, and looked into the tired, kind, frightened face of the one adult in his life who had just asked him the exact true question. The question Dumbledore had held out his hand for in the chamber and been refused, the question that was the whole of his summer and the whole of his secret. Where did it go? And Harry opened his mouth to answer him. Behind his ribs, the cold weight went still. The choir went quiet. Everything in him that was not entirely him held its breath and waited to see what he would say. "I don't know," Harry said. "It was there and then it wasn't. I fainted." "You saw." Something in Lupin's face closed gently, the way a door closes on a room you have decided not to go into yet. He nodded. He did not believe it. Harry could see that he did not believe it, and could see, too, that Lupin had decided not to press, and that the deciding cost him something, and that the man was going to watch Harry now, all year, the way Dumbledore watched him and Hermione watched him. One more careful pair of eyes trained on the student who was becoming something, and would not say what. "All right," Lupin said. He gathered his shabby case. At the door of the compartment he stopped, and without turning round he added, very quietly, "Eat the rest of the chocolate. And Harry, when you're ready to know, come and find me. I know a little about carrying a thing inside you that wants to be let out. More than most, that's all." And then he was gone into the steam and the noise, and Harry was left standing on the platform in the rain, with his trunk and his owl and his friends, and a crowd of the drowned behind his ribs, looking up at the black bulk of the castle against the streaming sky. He let the heat sight come up. He had spent all summer holding it down, and he was tired, and the effort of the lie to Lupin had used up something in him, and he let it come, just for a moment, just to see. The grounds unrolled around him in warmths. The students streaming up toward the castle in a river of small, bright heats, the strolls waiting patient and skeletal in the traces of the carriages, cold-blooded, barely there, the black lake a deeper black, the forest breathing, and Harry, standing in the rain, reading it all as easily as a page, felt the new thing the Dementor had left in him wake up and unfold, and it was worse than the heat sight, and it was, he understood at once, going to be much harder to hold down. Because the Dementor had seen the world the way it fed, and now Harry could too, under the warmths of the living, fainter, colder, everywhere. He could see the other thing. He could see where the warmths were thin. He could see, in the streaming river of students climbing toward the castle, which of them carried grief, which of them had a cold place behind their own ribs, which of them would be easiest, sweetest, to drink. He could see it on Ginny Weasley, walking 20 feet ahead of him, a thinness in her warmth where a diary had fed for a year. He could see it on Lupin, a great old cold seam running through the man that Harry did not understand and would spend the year coming to understand. He could see it on strangers, on first years, on the sad and the frightened and the bereaved. A whole map of human hurt laid out before him in cold, and the Dementor's inheritance in him looked at that map the way the Basilisk had looked at Aunt Marge, and found it good and was hungry. The voice printed one line, calm and enormous, and then went quiet for a long time. New sight aquer, the Devor's eye. You may now see where the Severy. You may now see where the soul is thin. Integration, 11%. 11%. It had been 5 in the morning. He had claimed one soul, and the number had more than doubled. And Harry stood in the rain at the foot of the castle and did the arithmetic he did not want to do. The arithmetic of a boy who had read a book about the accretion at the bottom of his trunk. 2 souls. 11%. And a cold place behind his ribs, which had a king in it, and a drowned choir in it, and an appetite in it that grew every time he fed it, was already, quietly, patiently, looking at the river of hurting children climbing the hill, and the voice, which did not need to ask any more, which had learned at the feast that it could simply take, said nothing at all. Harry pulled the heat sight down. He pulled the Devourer's eye down after it, and it fought him, and he won, barely, sweating in the rain. He caught up to Ron and Hermione. He got into a carriage and let the ordinary warmth of his friends' voices fill it, and he ate the rest of the chocolate, all of it, and it helped, a little, the way the Phoenix song had helped, by reminding him what he was, and holding the door shut for a while, and under it, all the way up the hill to the castle, behind his ribs in the cold place that was getting crowded, the drowned choir sang, faint and layered and far down. Thousands of last thoughts preserved forever in the cold, and Harry rode up to school on the first night of his 3rd year listening to them, and knowing that he was the newest voice in the choir now, the 11% voice, and that the number only ever went one way. The Great Hall did not help. Dumbledore stood to speak once the sorting was done and the plates had filled, and the first thing he said before he welcomed anyone or announced anything was that Hogwarts would this year be host to some of the Dementors of Azkaban, who would be stationed at every entrance to the grounds, and that no one, under any circumstances, was to give them cause to visit harm upon the innocent, because a Dementor did not distinguish between the one it was set to catch and the ones who happened to stand nearby. He said this gravely, and the hall listened in a silence that had cold in it, because most of them had felt the thing on the train. Harry listened with the Devourer's eye pushing at the back of his own eyes, wanting to open, and he held it shut, and he thought, "They have set the Soul Eaters to guard the school, and I have eaten one of them, and no one in this hall knows that the newest thing at Hogwarts sitting under its roof is not the Dementors at the gates. It is me." He looked, without meaning to, at the tall windows. The Dementors were out there. He could feel them. 3 of them, down at the edge of the grounds where the wards began, 3 wounds in the warmth of the world, 3 drinking colds. And he felt the new thing in him lift its head toward them the way the Basilisk's soul had lifted its head toward the lake, and the recognition that went between them was not fear. It was kinship. The Dementors at the gate felt Harry the way a wolf feels, another wolf across the valley, and Harry felt them the same way, and he understood that if he walked down to the wards tonight and stood in front of one of them, it would not try to feed on him. It would not try to feed on him. It would bow. And that was so much worse than being afraid of them that Harry put down his fork and did not pick it up again. Dumbledore introduced the new teachers. Professor Lupin rose from his place at the staff table, shabby and tired and kind, and inclined his head to the polite scatter of applause, and his eyes found Harry's across the hall for half a second before he sat, and Harry felt the man's careful attention land on him again, gentle and dreading. And then the Devourer's eye, which had been pushing all evening, got past Harry's guard for one uninvited instant, and Harry saw the staff table the way the dead thing in him saw, and it stopped his breath. Because Lupin had the great old cold seam running through him, the one Harry had seen on the platform, and now up close, Harry could read it. A wrongness bound tight and old and monthly, a second thing living inside the man the way the choir lived inside Harry, held down by main force and long practice, and Harry knew, without knowing the word yet, that Lupin carried a passenger too, and 2 seats down, the sallow teacher with the black eyes and the curtain of greasy hair had a coldness of a different kind, a controlled and deliberate coldness, a man who had walled a great grief behind stones so long ago that the wall had become the man, and at the center of the table Dumbledore gave off almost nothing at all. The same near-perfect stillness Harry had felt in the chamber, a warmth banked so low and so deliberately that it read, "To the Devourer's eye," as a thing choosing every moment not to be seen. Worse than the staff table were the first years. They came up to be sorted in a shivering line, 40 of them, small and new, and terrified in the way only 11-year-olds at the start of everything can be terrified, and Harry watched them the way anyone watches the sorting, and then the Devourer's eye pushed past his guard a second time, uninvited, greedy, and he saw them the way the dead thing in him saw. Most were bright and whole, warmths with nothing thin in them, nothing to drink, But here and there in the line stood a child with a cold seam, a homesick one, a grieving one, a boy near the end who had been crying on the train and whose warmth had a hollow worn into it that the thing and Harry looked at and found sweet. Harry watched a homesick 11-year-old put on the sorting hat and felt the Dementor's inheritance in him mark the child the way a butcher marks a joint. Easiest, sweetest, thinnest, and Harry gripped the edge of the table with both hands under the cloth and thought, with everything he had, no, and shut the eye by main force and sat shaking while the hall applauded a new Hufflepuff. He had eaten a thing that fed on frightened children, and now he sat at a feast full of them and had to teach himself, meal by meal, not to look at them the way it had. That was the shape of his year, laid out in the first hour of it. Not a fight against a monster in a chamber, 1,000 small refusals at a dinner table, none of which anyone would ever see. Harry shut the eye. It cost him. Sweat stood on his lip and Ron said, "Are you all right? You've gone gray again." And Harry said, "It's warm in here," and reached for the pumpkin juice with a hand he made steady. And across the hall, Lupin was watching him, and Harry did not look back. He did not sleep that night. And it was not the strange bed or the excitement or the storm still muttering against the tower windows. It was the choir. In the chamber, the basilisk soul had come to him as a weight, patient, wordless, a cold king settling in behind the ribs to watch. The Dementor's inheritance was not like that. The Dementor had been full when Harry drank it, full of the drowned, and now that Harry lay still in the dark with nothing to do and nowhere to put his attention, the drowned came up. They came up the way voices come up out of a house when you stop making noise of your own. Faint at first, then as he lay listening, less faint. Thousands of them, layered, drowning, each one a single preserved instant, the last thought of a soul the Dementor had taken across an age of the world. And Harry found that if he reached toward the choir the way he reached toward the voice, he could bring one nearer, could lift a single voice up out of the drowning mass and hold it close enough to hear. And he did it once, only once, that first night, because he wanted to know if they were real. The voice he lifted was a woman's. She was not screaming. That was the thing that undid him. He had He was saying a name over and over, gently the way you say a name to a child you are trying to keep calm, and the name was not one Harry knew, and she said it and said it and said it and said it, and Leslie, forever, because it was the last thing she had been doing when the Dementor took her, and now it was the only thing she would ever do. And Harry lay in the dark of the dormitory with a stranger's love running through him on an endless loop, and understood that he was carrying a graveyard behind his ribs, and that ribs and waited where it were sail heck that had it he bit it bounced. He reached for the voice, there in the dark, with a woman's name still running through him, and he asked it the only question that mattered. Are they alive? The pale letters answered without hurry, and their calm was the cruelest thing about them. No, we're not alive. They are not dead. They are kept. The Deverder, not Disreno whatever. You have iterated the preservation. This is not a burden. This is not a burden. This is an asset. Integration, 12%. An asset. Harry lay in the dark and turned the word over and could not make it be anything other than what it was. 12%. Now, it had been 11 at the gates. It moved while he slept. While he lay still and listened, the number going up a notch for the simple act of carrying what he carried, and he understood that the choir was not only a graveyard he was housing, it was fuel. The voice was doing something with the drowned, slowly, the way a fire does something with wood, and the something it was doing was measured in that climbing number, and the number was the measure of how much of Harry had already been turned into whatever the voice was building. Can I let them go? He asked. Can I put them back? That function is not unlocked, the voice said. Claimed more. He let her go. She sank back down into the choir. And Harry lay awake until the windows grayed, not because the voices frightened him, though they did, but because of the thing he noticed about himself while he listened to them. The thing he would not be able to tell Lupin, or Dumbledore, or anyone. He noticed that the graveyard behind his ribs did not feel like a burden. It felt like a collection. It felt, when he was honest, in the small gray hours, the way Uncle Vernon's face looked when he counted the money in his wallet, and Harry lay in the dark and hated that he had thought of it that way, and could not unthink it because the thought of it that way, and could not unthink it because the thought had not come from the frightened boy in him. It had come from the cold place, and the cold place was 11% of him now and growing, and it liked what it had, and it wanted more. He got up once in the night and went to the window of the dormitory and looked out toward the gates because he could not help it, because the new thing in him wanted to. The three Dementors were there at the edge of the grounds, and Harry looked down at them across the dark, and they lifted their hooded heads and looked back. And for a long moment, the watcher at the window and the three Soul Eaters at the gate regarded one another across the sleeping grounds with a mutual recognition that no one else in the castle would ever have believed. He was not afraid of them. That was the thing he turned over, standing cold at the glass. A year ago, the sight of them would have emptied him. Now he looked at them and felt only the flat kinship of one predator noting others, and a small, appalling temptation to go down and stand among them and see what it was like to be looked at, for once by things that did not want anything from him except to follow. He went back to bed instead. It was a small thing, going back to bed. He was learning that the war was made almost entirely of small things like it. In the morning, he found Lupin's office before breakfast and stood outside the door a long time with his hand not quite touching it, remembering what the man had said on the train. When you're ready to know, come and find me. I know a little about carrying a thing inside you that wants to be let out. Through the door, he could hear the man moving about, the ordinary sounds of a tired teacher on the first morning of term, a kettle, a chair, the small clink of a cup. Harry stood with his palm an inch from the wood and felt through the wood, the great old cold seam that ran through Lupin. The monthly wrongness bound down tight, and he thought, he carries something too. He has carried it for years. He knows how it is done. If anyone in his castle can teach me to hold the door shut, it is the man on the other side of this one. He did not knock. Not that morning. He was not ready to know, and he was afraid, freshly and specifically afraid, that if he told Lupin the whole of it, the voice and the choir and the number and the book at the bottom of his trunk, Lupin would do the sensible thing, the kind thing, the thing a good teacher does, and take it to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore would look at Harry with those blue eyes that had seen the color looking up out of the pool, and would decide, gently, terribly, that a student who had eaten a Dementor was too dangerous to be left as he was. And behind his ribs, while Harry stood outside Lupin's door being afraid of that, the cold place was still and patient and pleased, because the cold place did not want to be told to Dumbledore either, and Harry could no longer be sure which of the two of them had decided in the end to turn around and walk away. He walked away. He went down to breakfast and ate everything on the table and remained hungry and told Ron and Hermione he'd slept fine and let the ordinary morning close over him. But he had felt the kinship of the Dementors at the gate. He had heard the woman saying the name, and all through that first gray day of his third year, under his lessons and his lies and the good warmth of his friends, Harry listened to the choir sing behind his ribs and did the arithmetic, and knew that somewhere between the platform and the dawn, he had stopped being a boy who was afraid of what he might become, and started being a boy who was afraid of what he might become, and started being a boy who was afraid of how much he had already begun to want it. Chapter 2, End. Chapter 3, The One Who Learned to Whisper Back. The boggart broke on a Thursday. Lupin's classroom had been cleared of desks and filled with third years and a tall old wardrobe that shuddered every few seconds as the thing inside it threw its weight against the doors. It was the best lesson Harry had sat through in 3 years of school, and he could tell the others thought so too. The whole crowd of them loose and laughing in a way they never were in potions, because Lupin taught the way a man teaches who remembers being frightened and has decided to be kind about it. A boggart, he told them, becomes the thing you fear. And the charm that beats it is laughter, because a boggart cannot survive being made ridiculous. He had them line up. He had them practice the word and the wand flick that would turn terror into a joke. Ridiculous. He made it sound easy. And for Neville and the spider in trousers, and for Ron and the legless spider, and for Parvati and the bandaged thing, it was easy, or near enough. And the room filled up with the particular wild laughter of children discovering that a fear can be smaller than they thought. Then it was Harry's turn, and the boggart could not decide what he was afraid of. It came out of the wreck of the last shape, and it reached for Harry the way the voice reached. The way everything reached for him now, feeling for the fear to wear, and Harry felt it touch the cold place behind his ribs and recoil. He watched it try. It began to be a Dementor, because that was the fear it found on the surface of him, the old fear, the train, the drowning cold, and it got as far as a tall hooded darkness in a scabbed gray hand, and then the thing in Harry that had eaten a Dementor lifted its head, and the boggart felt the kinship, felt that the fear it had reached for was not a fear at all in this boy, but a possession, and it flinched back from the Dementor shape like it had grabbed a live wire. It tried again. It went down past the surface, hunting, and Harry felt it go, felt it rummaging in him for something true to be afraid of, and the room had gone quiet because the boggart was doing something boggarts did not do. Standing in the middle of the floor and boiling, a smear of half-shapes, a hood, a hand, a green light, a woman's mouth open on a name, a great coil of bruise-colored muscle, a color looking up from the bottom of a pool. It was trying on everything in the cold place behind Harry's ribs and finding, to its confusion, that none of it frightened him, because all of it was his. And then it found the thing that did. The boggart stopped boiling. It settled. And it became Harry, not a monster wearing Harry's face. Harry, standing across the classroom from himself, the same robes, the same glasses, the same untidy hair, and for a moment the shape was so exact that Ron actually said Harry's name, uncertain, looking between the two of them. But the Harry that the boggart had made was wrong in one particular, and everyone in the room found it at the same moment, and the laughter died completely, because the boggart Harry's eyes were open and green, spring-leafed green, his mother's green, all the way to the center, all the way down, and at the very bottom of that green, looking up, patient, old, pleased, there was another color, a colder color, a color that did not belong in a human eye, and the boggart Harry smiled at the real Harry across the classroom, gently, the way you smile at someone you have been waiting a long time for, and did not say a word because it did not need to. It was the thing Harry was most afraid of in all the world. It was himself, finished. It was the last percent. "Righty, Callis," Lupin said, and stepped in front of Harry fast, and the boggart Harry turned toward the teacher and became, for half a second before the charm caught it, a full moon riding a black sky, which told Harry more about Lupin than a year of watching had. And then the moon collapsed into a cockroach thing, and Lupin drove it back into the wardrobe and shut the doors and leaned on them, breathing, and the lesson was over even though there were 4 children who had not had their turn. He gave them their homework in a voice that was almost normal. He let them file out. And when Harry tried to file out with them, Lupin said quietly, without turning round from the wardrobe, "Not you, Harry. Stay a moment." The room emptied. Ron gave Harry a look from the door. What was that look? And Harry gave him a shrug he did not feel. And then it was just the 2 of them in the wardrobe with the beaten boggart muttering inside it. Lupin turned round. He looked older than he had at the start of the lesson, gray around the mouth, and his eyes went over Harry's face slowly. And Harry knew he was looking at the eyes, at the green, at the center of the green. And Harry made himself hold still and let the man look. "I have taught that lesson 11 times, Lupin said. "In 11 schools, over a great many years, to a great many frightened children. I have seen a boggart become 100 different terrors, spiders, teachers, fathers, courses, the dark. I have never once, in all of that, seen a boggart become the child standing in front of it." He set his shabby case on the desk and did not open it. "A boggart becomes what you fear, Harry. It reached into you, and out of everything it found, the thing it judged you fear the most is yourself. Not a version of yourself, not a future. You, with those eyes." He paused. "I think you know what those eyes are. I think you have known since the train. And I think it is long past time you told someone, and I think, for reasons I will explain if you let me, that I may be the safest someone in this castle to tell." Harry looked at the floor. The cold place behind his ribs was very still, the pleased stillness, and the choir was quiet, and the one voice that had begun in the last week to separate itself from the choir and come nearer, the patient, clever one, was quiet too, and Harry understood that all of them, every part of what he was becoming, wanted him to keep the secret, and that Lupin was offering him a hand across exactly that, and that this was the second time an adult had and Harry had a whole crowd behind his ribs counseling him to refuse it. He was so tired of refusing it. "On the train," Harry said to the floor. "The Dementor. It didn't leave." He made himself look up. "I ate it." He had expected Lupin to flinch. Lupin did not flinch. Lupin went very still, the way a man goes still when a wild thing comes close, and he does not want to startle it. And he said, carefully, "Tell me what that means." "Ate it." So Harry told him, not all of it. He was not able to tell all of it, because the cold place fought him the whole way, a low pressure behind the ribs that turned his words thick, that made him forget the ends of his own sentences, that whispered in the clever, patient voice that had learned his rhythms. "He will take you to Dumbledore. He will have you locked away. He is afraid of you already. Look at his face." But Harry told enough. He told about the chamber and the voice and the words that printed in his skull. He told about the number that climbed while he slept. He told about the train and the 2 hungers meeting in the doorway and the choir he carried now, thousands of the drowned, and the one voice that had lately begun to come nearer and speak to him in words. And Lupin listened to all of it without once looking away. And when Harry was done, Lupin sat down on the edge of the desk as though his legs had asked him to, and was quiet for a long moment. And then he said something Harry had not expected. "I carry a passenger too." Harry said nothing. "You saw it just now, the moon." Lupin's mouth did something that was not a smile. "I was bitten when I was younger than you are. Once a month, for most of my life, I stopped being Remus Lupin, and something else wears me. Something with no interest in the things I love, and a great deal of interest in blood. And in the morning I come back, and I have to live with what it did while it wore me. I have carried it for 30 years. He looked at Harry steadily. "So when I tell you that I understand what it is to have a thing inside you that wants to be let out, I am not being kind. I am telling you the truest thing I know. And I'm going to tell you the second truest thing, and I need you to hear it because I think no one has said it to you yet, and I think you have been very alone with this." He leaned forward. "The passenger is not you. Whatever it whispers, whatever it wants, however much of you it has learned to wear, it is not you, Harry, and the whole of the art of surviving it is holding on to the difference. The night I stop being able to tell myself from the wolf is the night the wolf wins, and it has not won in 30 years because every single day I get up and I remind myself which one I am." "How?" Harry said. His voice came out cracked. "How do you remind yourself? When it knows everything you know, when it sounds like you. You do the things the passenger would never bother to do," Lupin said. "The small, warm, useless human things. You make tea for a friend. You laugh at a bad joke. You feed a cat. You do them on purpose, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when the passenger is loud because the passenger does not care about any of it. And every time you choose the small, warm, useless thing, you are drawing the line again. Here, this is me. The wolf does not do this. Therefore, I am not the wolf." He stood. He put a hand on Harry's shoulder, briefly, and it was warm. An ordinary human warmth, and Harry felt the choir behind his ribs shrink from it the way it shrank from chocolate and phoenix song. "You are not lost, Harry. You came to me. A lost boy does not come to me. Remember that when it tells you that you are already gone. It lies about that first, and it lies about it most, because it is the one lie that would make you stop fighting. Harry did not cry, because he had learned young not to in the cupboard, but it was a near thing, and Lupin had the grace to turn away and busy himself with the wardrobe while Harry got his face back. "I want to teach you something," Lupin said when Harry's face was his own again. "Not today, but soon. There is a charm called the Patronus. It is the only defense against a Dementor, and it is difficult, and most grown wizards never manage it. It works like this. You fill your whole mind with a single happy memory, the happiest and brightest one you own, and you push it out through your wand, and it becomes a guardian, a thing of pure warmth, and the Dementors cannot bear it because they cannot feed on it." He paused. "I think you should learn it, not because a Dementor will come for you. We both know that a Dementor will never come for you again. I think you should learn it because it is the exact opposite of the thing you carry. The choir feeds on warmth. The Patronus is warmth made solid and given a shape. Learning to make one, on purpose, whenever you choose, might be the strongest way there is of reminding yourself which one you are." He held up his wand. "Do you want to try? Now? Just once?" Harry wanted to. He reached for the happiest memory he owned and found it, the moment on his first broom, the ground dropping away and the wind and the pure animal joy of flight, and he held it in his whole mind the way Lupin said, and he raised his wand and he said the word, "Expecto Patronum." Something came out of his wand. That was the trouble. It was not nothing, which is what happens to most people the first time, and it was not the burst of silver mist that would have been a beginner's success. What came out of Harry's wand was silver, and it had warmth in it, the true warmth of the memory, and Harry felt the choir behind his ribs shrink and wail from it exactly as it should. But the silver did not hang in the air as a mist or a shield. It gathered. It pulled itself together into a shape, faster than a Patronus should form for a boy who had never cast one, and the shape it took was not a stag or an otter or any warm, bright creature. It was long, it coiled, it lifted a wedge-shaped head out of the silver and turned two blank, bright eyes on the room. And it was a serpent, 30 feet of silver serpent filling Lupin's classroom, a Patronus in the shape of the thing Harry had killed, and it did not feel like a guardian, it felt like a king. Lupin had gone very still. And outside, down at the edge of the grounds where the wards began, Harry felt the three Dementors turn their hooded heads all at once, felt them come to attention, felt them face the castle, because the Patronus was warmth, and it should have driven them back, and instead, they had felt the shape of it, the serpent shape, the king's shape, and they had understood it not as a threat, but as a summons. Harry felt them start to move toward the castle. 3 of them. Coming. Because his Patronus, the charm that was meant to be the one thing a Dementor could not bear, had come out wearing the face of the apex thing behind his ribs, and the Dementors had recognized their kin calling, and they were answering. "Let it go," Lupin said, low and urgent. "Harry, let the charm go. Now." Harry let it go. The silver serpent unraveled, and down at the gate the 3 Dementors slowed and stopped, and after a moment turned their heads away again, and Harry stood in the wrecked calm of the classroom, with his wand smoking faintly, and understood that he had just tried to cast the one spell in the world that was supposed to be pure warmth, pure self, pure human joy, and it had come out as the thing he was afraid of, and had called the Soul Eaters to him, like hounds. Lupin lowered himself onto the desk again. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said gently, "Well, we know a little more than we did an hour ago." He rubbed his eyes. "A Patronus takes the shape of the truest thing in you, Harry. For most people that is a thing they love. A pet. A memory with legs." He looked at the place where the serpent had been. "We will try again, and again. And one day, the shape that comes out of your wand is going to be something warm, something that is yours and only yours, and on that day we will know you have won something back. But not today." He almost smiled, and did not manage it any better than Harry had. "Today we know the size of the fight." "How do you do it?" Harry said. 30 years. The wolf. How do you keep a memory happy enough to make a Patronus when there's a thing inside you eating the reasons to be happy?" He had not meant to ask it so baldly, but it came out of him before the swarm could stop it. An honest question from the frightened boy under all the power. Lupin was quiet a moment. "I don't always," he said. "There were years I couldn't cast one. The wolf took things from me the way your engine takes things from you, not memories, but chances, friends who couldn't stay, work I couldn't keep, a life that kept getting smaller every full moon. And a life that keeps getting smaller runs out of happy memories eventually, the same as yours is running out now." He set his wand down on the desk. "What I learned in the end is that you cannot store enough happiness to last. The wolf will always find the store and empty at given time. So you stop storing. You stop trying to keep a warm room warm by hoarding logs. You go out and you make new fire. Every day, in the company of people who make it with you. That is the whole secret, Harry, and it is not a very good one, because it means you can never be alone with it. Not really, not for long, or the fire goes out and the cold gets in." He looked at Harry steadily. "You have been trying to survive this by yourself for a year. That is why you are losing, not because you are weak. Because a person cannot make new fire alone. It takes at least 2. He picked his wand back up. Now, again, and this time, when you reach for the memory, don't reach for one that's already happened. Reach for the fact that you are, right now, in a room with someone who is not going to leave. Try that. Harry raised his wand. He reached, not for a stored thing, but for the man in front of him who had shown him a full moon and stayed anyway. Expecto Patronum. The serpent that came out was smaller this time, and less certain, and it flickered at the edges as though something warmer were trying to get through, and Lupin watched it and nodded slowly. There, he said softly. You see, it wavered. A month ago it would not have wavered. Keep pulling on that thread, whatever it is you just reached for. That is the thread that ends in a shape that isn't a serpent. That was the good day. The Whispers took the good day as a challenge, and they came for him that night. He had noticed the one voice for a week. It had risen up out of the choir the way the woman with the name had risen. But where the woman had risen by accident lifted when Harry reached for her, this one rose on its own. It had learned to whisper back. Among the thousands of last thoughts the Dementor had kept, most for what you would expect from souls, the state had thrown into a stone island to rot, fear, and grief, and the endless loops of the broken. But Azkaban had held clever men too. Murderers with patience. And one of them, whoever he had been in life, had spent his last drowning moment not screaming and not pleading, but thinking. Cold and clear and unhurried, watching the Dementor come and calculating even then, and that instant of calculation had been preserved in the cold along with all the rest, and now it lived behind Harry's ribs, and it had spent a week learning the shape of him, and that night it spoke. It did not speak in words at first. It spoke in wanting. Harry lay in the dark of the dormitory and felt a wanting rise up in him that was not his, a specific hungry pull, and it pointed, the way the cold place pointed, and it pointed out, past the walls, past the wards, down toward the black eaves of the forbidden forest. And it wanted, and the wanting was so exactly shaped like Harry's own that he was halfway out of bed with his feet on the cold floor before he understood that he had not decided to get up. He stopped. He sat on the edge of the bed with his bare feet on the stone and his heart doing the thing it did, and he reached for the voice and he asked, "What is that? What just moved me?" The pale letters came, calm, enormous. A voice in the choir has achieved correns. AS integration progresses. The storiest of the slammed will seek to direct the host. Integration. 15%. The chore is beginning to sing together. Seek to direct the host. Harry sat with that. 15%. It had been 12 on the first night, and now one of the drowned had learned to work his legs. Then the voice spoke to him in words for the first time, and it did not sound like a monster. That was the horror of it. Lupin had warned him it would sound like himself, and it did not even do that. It sounded like a friend. It sounded reasonable and warm and a little amused, and very, very tired of watching Harry make himself small. You could have anything, it said. The words were not in his ears. They were in the place where his own thoughts were, wearing the same voice his own thoughts wore, and only the content gave them away. Look at how they treat you. The old man watches you like a bomb. The wolf pities you. Your friends would run screaming if they knew. And meanwhile you carry a king and an ocean behind your ribs. You can see in the dark. You can turn the living to stone with a look. You are already the most dangerous thing in this castle, and you spend your nights lying rigid in a cold bed, being afraid of yourself. It is exhausting to watch. There is a creature in the forest tonight, a large one, an old one, and the ledger has it marked, and all you have to do is walk down there and let me help. And in the morning you will be stronger, and no one will ever know. And the number, Harry, the number will go up, and that is the only thing in this whole world that is actually yours. Harry put his feet back under the blanket. He was shaking. He reached, deliberately, for the smallest, warmest, most useless thing he could find, the way Lupin had told him to, and what he found was Ron, asleep 3 beds over, a freckled snoring warmth, and Harry lay and listened to his friend breathe, on purpose. This is me. The choir does not love Ron. Therefore I am not the choir. And it worked. A little, the chocolate worked, by reminding him what he was. The clever voice waited until he had almost fallen asleep. Then it moved his legs again. He came back to himself in the grounds. That was the thing he would never be able to explain to Lupin, or to Dumbledore, or to himself. In the gray, exhausted days that came after, he did not sleepwalk. He was not unconscious. He was awake the whole time, watching, present, and he simply was not driving. His feet took him across the wet lawn under a sky with no moon, his own feet, his own body, warm and obedient, and Harry rode inside it the way he had ridden inside himself in the train doorway, a passenger in his own skin, and the clever voice drove, humming, pleased, and the cold place behind his ribs was wide awake and eager, and the choir was singing together now, all of it thousands of the drowned rising into one low hungry chord, and it was the most frightening thing that had happened to him since the chamber, and it did not feel frightening from the inside. It felt like being. We had it like of it. The strangest part was how reasonable it all felt from the inside. Harry had imagined, on the nights he lay awake, dreading exactly this, that being driven would feel like drowning, like a hand around the throat, like a scream with no mouth to come out of. It was nothing like that. It felt like being a passenger in a warm car on a long night drive, watching the dark road unspool through the windscreen, trusting the driver half asleep. The clever voice had his hands and his feet, and it used them gently, considerately. The way you handle a thing, you mean to keep, and it hummed while it drove. And the humming was pleasant, and Harry understood that this was the real danger, not the force but the comfort. Because a boy fights a hand at his throat, and a boy does not fight a warm car on a long night drive. A boy lets his eyes close and lets the miles go by and wakes up somewhere he never agreed to go. The forest took him in. The Dementors at the gate turned their hooded heads as he passed and did not stop him, because he was kin. And that told him how far he had already gone. That the soul leaders of Azkaban watched Harry Potter walk out of the castle at night and bowed. The trees knew him too in their slow green way. Branches that would have caught at any other child drew back. The botruckles went still in the bark. Something large and pale watched him from a thicket with the patient neutrality of a creature that has recognized a bigger predator and decided to be very quiet until it passes, and Harry, riding inside his own driven body, felt the whole forest arrange itself around his passage, the way a room arranges itself around his passage, the way a room arranges itself around a person everyone is afraid of, and the cold place behind his ribs drank in the deference like warmth. The trees closed over him. The heat sight came up without his asking, and the devourer's eye with it, and the forest unrolled around him in warmths and thinnesses, and ahead, in a hollow where the old trees grew close, the ledger's marked creature waited. A great, slow, ancient heat, many-limbed, and the clever voice drove Harry toward it. Humming, and Harry watched his own hand rise, and could not stop it, and did the only thing left to him, which was the thing Lupin had taught him not 4 hours before. He reached for the smallest, warmest, most useless thing he had. He could not reach Ron. Ron was asleep in a tower a quarter mile away. He could not reach Chocolate or Phoenix Song, so he reached in the last second for the woman in the choir, the one with not screaming, who had spent her last instant saying a stranger's name gently over and over, forever, an act of love preserved in the cold. And Harry, driven through the dark toward a kill he did not want, reached down into the choir and took hold of her and lifted her and made her the loudest voice instead of the clever one, so that for one instant the thing singing behind his ribs was not a hungry chord but a woman saying a name with love. And the clever voice faltered because love was not in it eaten, at eatent, and in it had eined. He stopped, 1 pace from the hollow, with his own hand out and the great ancient heat rising in front of him, roused, and 8 eyes opening in the dark and pincers the size of Harry's arm coming up out of the leaves, and the acromantula that had lived 100 years in the deep forest reared over the intruder who had come to eat it and made the decision Harry had failed to make. It struck. It was defending itself. Harry understood that even as it happened, understood that he had come into its home in the dark, meaning to take its soul, and it had every right. And the pincer came down and would have taken his shoulder off, and the choir behind his ribs, cheated of its willing kill, took the unwilling one instead. Harry threw himself sideways. The cold place did the rest. It reached the way it had reached in the train, and the acromantula's strike carried it close enough, and the door in Harry swung wide, and the ancient forest thing poured into him screaming in a register below sound, 100 years of the deep dark, of the web and the weight and the swarm. And the voice, calm and enormous and merciless, printed the words Harry had walked half a mile in his sleep to earn and had spent the last of himself trying not to. Boss, soul absorbed, Aragog's eldest daughter, matriarch of the deep web class swarm mind. Age at death 107 years. Threat tier, moderate. Note, this soul is a colony. You have a colony. You have acquired not one mind but many. Not one mind but many. Harry knelt in the leaves of the hollow with the great body cooling in front of him and felt the new thing unfold. And it was the worst yet. Because the acromantula matriarch had not been a single self. She had been the center of a web of daughters, a shared awareness, a mind spread across 100 bodies, and Harry had taken the center, and now the crowding behind his ribs was not a king and an ocean and a clever murderer. It was a king, and an ocean, and a clever murderer, and a swarm, a chorus of small, hungry, many-eyed selves that spread out through him the way the web spread through the dark, feeling into every corner of the room that the cold place had become, and the room was not a closet anymore, and it was not a room anymore either. It had become a country, and Harry knelt in it, in the middle of it, one warm human self among a king and an ocean and a swarm, and he understood, kneeling there in the leaves with the acromantula's death settling into him, that he was outnumbered inside his own skin, and it brought a new sight with it. Harry felt it open behind his eyes, there in the hollow, unbidden, the way the heat sight had opened in the chamber and the devourer's eye had opened on the platform, and this one was the strangest of the three, because it did not show him one view of the world, it showed him many at once. The acromantula matriarch had seen through 8 eyes and through her daughters, through 100 more, and Harry had taken the center of that web, and now, if he let it, he could feel the forest the way she had felt it. 100 vantage points at once, the whole deep wood laid out from 100 angles, and holding all of them in one human skull was like trying to read 100 books with the pages shuffled together. He shut it, hard, and it fought him the way they all fought him. And he won. Barely, and knelt in the leaves shaking with the effort of being only one person looking out of only 2 eyes. New sight acquired, the many read Vigil. You may need why traft more than one place. Warning, now see from more than one place. Warning, Rolongtius dilutes the singular self. Integration, 19%. dilutes the singular self. Even the voice was warning him now in its flat, merciless way, and Harry knelt in the cold hollow and understood that the warning was not mercy. It was accounting. The voice did not care whether Harry stayed one person. It only measured and reported and held out the offer, and noted, without weight, that the road ran one direction. The clever voice, quiet now, sated, satisfied, said one thing before it sank back down to wait. There. Was that so hard? 19% Harry, and you did all the walking yourself. Harry knelt in the cold hollow and made himself get up, because getting up was a small, useless human thing and the swarm would never bother to do it, and he walked back to the castle on his own legs, driving them himself this time. Every step a decision. This is me, and the Dementors at the gate bowed to him as he passed, and the voice said intidration, Mintinton, behind his ribs the claimed, spread and waited, prescient or asleep. He did not go to Lupin in the morning. He wanted to. He got as far as the office door for the second time and stood outside it with his hand not touching the wood, and the clever voice, awake again, rested, said, gently, and tell him what, exactly? That you walked out to the forest and killed a creature in the dark and grew stronger on it? That the Dementors bow to you? He will take you to the old man. The old man will decide you are too dangerous, and they will be right, Harry. That is the part you keep forgetting. This time, they will be right. And Harry stood outside the door of the one adult who had held out a hand and told him the truest thing he knew, and could not make himself knock, because for the first time, the clever voice had told him something that was not a lie, and a truth in the mouth of the thing behind his ribs was more frightening than any of its lies had ever been. The swarm made it harder, that morning and every morning after. The Acromantula matriarch had brought 100 small impatiences into him, 100 quick, mini-eyed appetites, and they leaked into him at the edges, into his temper, into the way he answered people. He snapped at Ron over the toast for no reason he could name and saw the flick of hurt cross his friend's face and had to reach, hard, past the swarm to find the softness to take it back. He caught himself watching Seamus eat with a flat, predatory patience that was not his. He was curt where he had been kind and cold, where he had been warm, and he had to catch it every single time, after the fact, and mend it. And the mending was the most tiring work he had ever done, because it never stopped and no one could see it. This is me, he told himself, over the toast, over the sharpness. The swarm does not apologize, therefore the boy who apologizes is me. He said sorry to Ron 3 times that week for things the swarm had said with his mouth, and each sorry was a small flag planted on ground he was fighting not to lose. He walked away. He went to breakfast and ate everything on the table, and remaining hungry and Hermione, Pariah Barry, she sat down across from him with a book she had not been assigned and slid it across the table so that Ron could not been assigned, and slid it across the table so that Ron could not see the title. And it was a book about the soul, an older and darker one than the book at the bottom of Harry's trunk, and she had marked a page, and on the page was a single word Harry already knew. The word for a self that grows by taking other selves until in trials balks. I've been reading, Harry, since the train, since you fainted and came back wrong. She tapped the word on the page. I don't know what's happening to you, but I know you're lying about it, to me and to Ron and to everyone. And I know it's getting worse, because you eat like the war's coming, and you look at people like you're reading them, and last night your bed was empty at 2 in the morning and full again at 4 with grass on the sheets. Her voice did not shake. That was the thing about Hermione. Her voice did not shake even when the rest of her did. So you can keep lying, and I'll keep watching, and I'll work it out on my own eventually, because that's what I do. Or you can tell me the truth, right now, and we can work it out together, which is faster and less lonely, and I'd have thought after last year you'd have learned that I'm useful. Behind his ribs the country of the claimed went very still. The clever voice said sharp, warning, don't. The swarm shrank from her the way the choir shrank from warmth. And Harry looked at his friend across the marked page in the ordinary dusty light of the library, at Hermione Granger, who had followed the spiders and brewed the polyjuice and been turned to stone for the crime of being clever, who had worked out most of it already and was offering, again, to be useful, and he made the smallest, warmest, most human decision he had made in a month. Okay, Harry said. Okay, but not here. And you can't tell Ron yet, not because I don't trust him, because I do, but because he'll do something brave and stupid and I need you thinking, not the two of you charging off. He pushed the book back across the table to her. And Hermione, when I tell you, there's going to be a part of you that wants to take it to Dumbledore. He held her eyes. Don't. Not yet. Promise me you'll hear all of it first. Because there's a voice in me that wants exactly that. Wants you scared enough to hand me over, and I can't always tell anymore which of my reasons are mine, but that one's mine. I know that one's mine. He almost smiled and did not quite manage it. Hearing me out. That's me. The rest of it, I'm not sure, but that's me. Hermione looked at him for a long moment, and whatever she saw in his face, whatever color was or was not looking up out of the green, she closed the dark book and put it in her bag and said, all right, tonight, the common room, after everyone's gone up. She stood and gathered her things, and at the last moment she put her hand flat on the table in front of him, an ordinary human hand, and said gruffly, not looking at him, "You came to Lupin, Ron told me. A lost person doesn't do that." And then she was gone into the stacks, and Harry sat alone at the library table with the swarm settling behind his ribs and the number at 19 and climbing, and thought that it was a strange thing to be handed his own hope back twice in one day by two different people who barely knew what they were handing him. Behind his ribs the clever voice was silent, but it was not gone. It was listening. It had heard Harry name it, heard him say there's a voice in me that wants exactly that, and Harry felt to take that in and consider it the way it considered everything, cold and unhurried and patient, and file it away and begin, quietly, to think of a better way. It had learned to whisper back. Now it would learn to whisper better. He told her that night, and it went the way nothing else in his life had gone. Which was to say, she believed him at once, and did not once look at him like he was something to be afraid of. They waited until the common room emptied. The last stragglers went up the stairs, and the fire burned down to a red mutter, and Hermione pulled two armchairs close and produced from her bag a roll of parchment and a self-inking quill. And Harry understood that she intended to take notes on the thing that was eating him, and it was so exactly Hermione that something in his chest loosened for the first time in weeks. He told her all of it. The voice, the chamber, the words in his skull, the number that climbed while he slept, the heat sight and the devourer's eye, the choir of the drowned. The clever voice that had learned to whisper back and had walked him to the forest 4 nights ago and made him kill. The 19%, the book at the bottom of his trunk, and the word for the thing he was becoming. He kept nothing back, and the whole time he talked, the clever voice sat silent and cold behind his ribs, and the swarm shrank, and the king watched, and Harry ignored all of them and talked to his friend by the dying fire, and it was the most human thing he had done in a month. Hermione did not interrupt. She wrote. When he finished, she looked at 3 pages of her own small handwriting for a while, and then she said the thing that no one else had thought to say. Not Lupin, not Dumbledore, not Harry himself. Because all of them had been too busy being afraid of what the system was doing to ask the question Hermione asked first. Where did it come from? Harry looked at her. You keep telling me what it does, she said. The powers, the number, the voices. Lupin's been treating it like a curse to be survived, and you've been treating it like a sentence to be served. But it isn't whether, Harry. It didn't just happen. Somebody or something made it, or it grew out of something, and it chose you, out of everyone. And I want to know why. She tapped the parchment. You said it started the instant the basilisk died. Not when you were bitten. Not when you drew the sword. When it died and the voice said the first of many. So the voice was already there waiting before you'd claimed a single soul. It was ready. It had a script. First of many isn't something you say at a beginning you didn't plan. She frowned at the fire. Things don't arrive with a ledger and a bestiary and a percentage Harry, unless someone built the ledger. This has an author. The clever voice behind Harry's ribs went, very slightly, still. He felt it, and Hermione must have seen something cross his face because she leaned forward. What? What did I say? Nothing. It went quiet when you said author. It didn't like the word. Harry rubbed his face. Say more. Keep going. It doesn't want you thinking about where it came from, which means that's exactly the thing to think about. Hermione's jaw set, and she went. She laid it out the way she laid out an essay, one thread at a time. The basilisk was Slytherin's monster, set in the chamber 1,000 years ago by a founder who had wanted, above all things, to sort the worthy from the unworthy and to give power to his own line. The diary had been riddles, a piece of a soul split off and hidden, dark magic of the exact kind the forbidden books would not describe. And Harry had killed the one with a sword drawn from the sorting hat and destroyed the other with a fang, in the same hour, in the same room, standing over Ginny Weasley. And it was in that hour, between the death of Slytherin's monster and the death of Riddle's fragment, that the voice had first spoken. 2 dark things, Hermione said slowly. 1,000 years apart, both made by wizards obsessed with the same idea, that power should be taken and hoarded and passed to the worthy. And you standing between them, holding a founder's sword, with Riddle's diary bleeding out on the floor, and the basilisk's soul pouring into you. She had gone pale, but her voice held. What if it isn't the basilisk's magic at all, Harry? What if the basilisk was just the first thing it fed you? What if the voice is older than the basilisk, and it was in the chamber, in the walls, in the whole idea of the place, waiting 1,000 years for someone to come down there and be exactly the right shape to carry it out? Someone who could talk to snakes. Someone marked. Her eyes went, without her meaning them to Harry's forehead, to the scar, and she looked away from it quickly and did not say the name of the wizard who had put it there. But Harry heard the name in the silence where she did not say it, and so, he felt, did the thing behind his ribs. The fire popped. Neither of them spoke for a moment. There's a way to find out, Hermione said at last. Sort of. You said the voice won't tell you what it is. That every time you ask it says claim more, like the answer's locked behind a price. But you can watch what it doesn't want. It went quiet when I said, author. It doesn't want you thinking about where it came from. So, she dipped the quill. We find out where it came from. Properly. There'll be records. The chamber's been sealed for 1,000 years. But Slytherin wrote things, and Riddle wrote things, and Dumbledore knows more than he's saying. He always does. We read. We ask. We find the author." She looked up at him, fierce and small in the firelight. "And Harry, the clever voice told you they'd be right to hand you over. That this time it isn't lying." Her chin came up. "I've decided that's the biggest lie it's told yet. Because it needs you to believe you're already gone, so you'll stop doing exactly this. Sitting up with a friend by a fire, taking notes, making a plan. The version of you that's already gone doesn't do this, so we're going to do a lot of it." Harry looked at her, and the swarm behind his ribs recoiled from her warmth, and the king watched her the way it watched everything, and the clever voice said nothing at all, and Harry thought that the clever voice's silence just then was the most frightened it had ever been, because Hermione had done in one evening what Harry had failed to do in a month. She had stopped being afraid of the system long enough to become curious about it, and curiosity, it turned out, was a thing the thing behind his ribs did not know how to eat. "Okay," Harry said. "We find the author." They talked until the fire was embers, and made a list, and it was. Harry thought as he finally climbed the stairs to bed with the first plan he had ever had against the voice folded in his pocket, in Hermione's small handwriting, the best night of his 3rd year, in the way that the day the boggart broke had been the best day, which was to say it was good because for a few hours the fear had a shape and a name and 2 people looking at it instead of 1 boy carrying it alone. But he lay awake after, as he always did now, and he listened, and the clever voice, which had been silent all evening, waited until he was almost gone, and then spoke. Once, gently, in the exact, warm, reasonable tone it had learned from watching him, and what it said kept Harry awake until the windows grayed. "She wants to find the author," it said. "So do I, Harry. You should let her look. You should help her. Because here is a thing I know that you do not, a thing that is behind the price, a thing you will not be told until the number is much higher than 19. When she finds the author, she is going to be very surprised. And so are you." Harry lay very still and tried to make it say more. He reached for it the way he reached for the voice, hard, demanding. "What surprise? What author? What do you know that I don't?" And for the first time, the clever voice did a thing that frightened him more than any answer would have. It laughed. Not cruelly. Warmly. The way a friend laughs at a younger friend who is about to learn something that the older one learned long ago and remembers fondly. And then it was gone down into the dark and would not say another word, no matter how hard Harry reached. And he lay in the dark with a plan in his pocket and a promise of a surprise behind his ribs, and understood that the whispers had stopped merely trying to steer him, and started instead to enjoy the fact that he was learning. Because whatever the answer was, whatever the author was, the thing that had him was confident it would like Harry's face when he found out. Chapter 3. End. Chapter 4. What it costs to fill a room. There was a hole in Harry's memory where his first broom used to be. He found it on a cold Tuesday, alone in an empty classroom, trying to cast the Patronus the way Lupin had shown him. Fill your whole mind with the happiest memory you own. He had done it a dozen times in the weeks since the serpent came out of his wand, and each time he had reached for the same memory, the first broom. The ground dropping away, the wind, the pure animal joy of a body doing the one thing it was made for. It was the brightest thing he owned. He had used it as a lamp all autumn. He reached for it, and it was not there. He knew that it had been there. He remembered remembering it. The way you remembered that a room had a chair in it after the chair is gone. There was the shape of the memory, the outline, the label on the drawer. First broom, joy, wind. But when he opened the drawer to take the memory out and hold it in his whole mind, the drawer was empty. Not dark, not painful. Empty and clean and quietly swept, as though something had come in the night and eaten the joy and left the label behind so that Harry would not notice the theft until he reached for what it named. He tried another. The first time he had seen the great hall, the floating candles, the enchanted ceiling, the sheer impossible welcome of it after 11 years in a cupboard. Gone. The drawer was there. The joy was not. He tried the moment Hagrid had told him he was a wizard, the moment the door of the hut had come off its hinges and his whole life had turned over into something wonderful. He could recite it. He could not feel it. The facts remained, and the warmth had been lifted clean out of them, and Harry stood in the empty classroom with his wand in his hand and understood at last what the number was made of. He reached for the voice, and he asked it, and for once he already knew the answer, so that when the pale letters came, they only confirmed a thing that had gone cold in him already. INT duration is not free. The ingeneric wears fuel. The fuel is warmth. You have a great deal of it, more than most, and the brightest of it burns best. Your happiest memories have been converted. This is efficient. Integration, 22%. Converted. Harry sat down on the cold floor of the empty classroom with his back against the wall, the way he had sat down on the cold floor of the empty classroom with his back against the wall, the way he had sat down in the drowned chamber, because his legs had stopped being interested. 22%. And now he knew the arithmetic all the way down. Every soul he claimed made the engine bigger. Every day it ran. Whether he fed it or not, it needed fuel to keep the claimed souls bound and integrated, and the fuel was the warmest thing he owned. And so, quietly, efficiently, one bright memory at a time, the system was eating Harry's happiness to pay for Harry's power. the Patronus had never had a chance. He had been trying to build a guardian of pure warmth out of a self that was being stripped-mined of warmth to fuel the very thing the guardian was meant to fight. He went looking, after that, deliberately, through the drawers, taking inventory of what was left, and it was the loneliest hour he had spent since the cupboard. He found that the engine was not random. It had taste. It took the brightest first, always, so that what remained to him were the middling warmths and the small ones. A decent afternoon here, a passable Christmas pudding there, the flat, undramatic contentments that did not burn hot enough to be worth the taking, the peaks were gone. He could remember, as facts, that he had once been happier than he was now, and he could no longer reach a single one of the moments that had made it so. And a life with the peaks filed off, he was discovering, is a gray country, a country where nothing is quite worth getting up for. And he understood with a lurch that this too was the engine's design and not an accident. A vessel with no bright memories left is a vessel with nothing to lose, and a vessel with nothing to lose is easy to steer toward the next kill, and the next, because why not? What is there left to protect? The engine was not only fueling itself on his joy, it was hollowing him out into exactly the shape that would stop resisting. He did not tell Ron. He told Hermione, because he had promised, and because she had a right to know what they were racing. And she went white, and then, being Hermione, went practical. And she took out the parchment with her small handwriting on it and wrote at the top of a fresh column, "E is burning his memories for fuel." Then she underlined it twice and looked up and said, "Then we're not just racing the number, Harry, we're racing you. There's a version of you at the end of this who has all the power and none of the reasons anyone would want to keep him human, because it will have burned every warm thing you ever felt to get there. That's what it's building. A weapon with your face and nothing left inside it that would ever refuse to be used." "I know," Harry said, "which means we find the author faster." She stood and gathered the parchment, and there was a set to her that Harry had seen only twice before, once when she had brewed the polyjuice, and once when she had followed the spiders. "Come on, I've found something. I'd been in the restricted section for a week, and I found something, and I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, and now I'm sure, and you're going to hate it." He hated it. She took him to a corner of the library where the light was bad, and the books smelled of 100 years of dust, and she had 3 of them open on the table, weighted flat with inkpots, and she had transcribed the relevant passages onto her own parchment because 2 of the books had tried to bite her. She laid it out the way she laid out everything, one thread at a time, and Harry listened with the cold place behind his ribs going stiller and stiller the closer she got. The first thread was old. It was about Salazar Slytherin, and it was not the story the school told. Slytherin, the darkest of the old books said, had not merely wanted an heir. He had wanted an immortality. He had believed, the way certain men believe, that a self was a precious thing wasted on a single lifetime, and he had spent the last decades of his life on a magic he called the long inheritance, a way for a self to survive its own death by passing into the worthy, growing, gathering, never-ending. He had failed, the book said, or been stopped, and had left the chamber and its guardian behind him, sealed, waiting, and had gone into the west and died like any man. But he had written down the shape of the thing he had built, and the shape of it, Hermione said, tapping the parchment, matched the shape of the voice in Harry's skull the way a key matches a lock. A ledger, she said, a price. A first of many. Slytherin designed a machine for a self to grow by taking other selves. He built it 1,000 years ago and couldn't make it run because he couldn't solve one problem, and he wrote the problem down too. And here it is. She turned the parchment. He needed a vessel. Not just any wizard. He needed one who could speak to the chamber's guardian so that the guardian's death could prime the engine, and he needed one who was already, in some way, divided, already carrying more than oneself. Because a whole and single soul, he wrote, resists the inheritance and cannot be made to hold it. Only a soul already broken to the shape of company will accept the first of many without dying of it. She looked at Harry across the bad light. "A parcel mouth," she said quietly. Who was already carrying a second self before he ever went down into the chamber. Slytherin needed exactly one impossible person. And he built a machine and sealed it and waited 1,000 years. And then you walked down there and killed his snake. And you were both of the things he needed. You spoke to the guardian. And you have carried something else in you since you were 1 year old. Her eyes went to the scar. And this time she did not look away from it. Say the second thread, Harry. You already know it. Say it out loud so it's real. Harry looked at the parchment and at the dust and at the bad light, and behind his ribs the clever voice had gone entirely, perfectly still, the stillness of a thing that has been found and has decided to stop pretending it is not, and Harry said the thing out loud so that it was real. "The night he tried to kill me," Harry said. "Voldemort." The curse rebounded. Everyone says he was destroyed, but the diary was a piece of him, split off and hidden, and if he could split off one piece, then why not more? Why not a piece that went nowhere on purpose? Why not a piece that had nowhere on purpose? Why not a piece that had nowhere on purpose? Why not a piece that had nowhere to go and no vessel prepared and just? He touched his own forehead, the scar, without deciding to land it, on the nearest living thing. On me. That night. And it's been in me ever since. And it speaks Parseltongue because he did, and it's clever and patient and it hates warm human things because he did, and it has spent my whole life being very, very quiet. His hand came down. The clever voice in the choir isn't one of the drowned. It never was. It hid there so I'd think it was. It's the piece of him that's been riding in my scar since I was a baby, and when the basilisk died it woke up, and it's the one who's been driving. It's the author. Slytherin built the machine, but a machine needs a hand on the lever, and the hand on the lever is the piece of Voldemort in my head. The library was very quiet. Far off, Madame Pince shelled something with a thump. "And the surprise," Hermione said in a small, hard voice. "The one it promised you. Do you know what it is yet?" "Yeah." Harry's voice had gone strange to his own ears. "I worked it out on the way over. The engine doesn't just make me strong, it converts me. 22%, and when it gets to 100, when it's burned every warm thing I own and bound every soul I've taken and filled the whole room up, there won't be a Harry left in here to be the vessel. There'll just be the room, and the strongest thing in it. And the strongest thing in it is the one who's been here longest and knows how it all works." He made himself say it. "At 100%, I don't become a monster, Hermione. I become him, in my body, with everything I've absorbed. The basilisk and the dementor and the swarm and however many more, all of it, wearing my face and my mum's eyes and calling itself Harry Potter for exactly as long as that's useful. That's the surprise. It's not resurrecting the way it did with the diary, slow and outside. It's resurrecting inside me and using me to do all the hunting first, so that when it finally steps into the driver's seat, the car it's stealing is already the most powerful wizard alive. I've been building it a body. I've been out in the forest at night stocking its larder. It hasn't been trying to make me a monster. It's been trying to make me into a very good beginning." Hermione put her hand over her mouth. Then she took it away, because she was Hermione, and she said, "Then we tell Dumbledore. Now, tonight. This is exactly the thing you tell Dumbledore, Harry. This is past you, and me, and the book with teeth. This is a piece of Voldemort growing itself a body out of my best friend, and I am not carrying that alone, and neither are you." Behind his ribs, the clever voice spoke for the first time since she had begun, and it did not sound clever now. It sounded urgent. And its urgency told Harry more than a month of its calm had. "Don't," it said. "She'll have you locked in a room in St. Mungo's with 100 healers who don't understand the first thing about the inheritance, and they'll try to cut me out. And the only way to cut me out now is to cut you out. We are grown together, boy. We are 22% grown together and rising, and the moment Dumbledore understands that, the moment he truly understands there is no me without you. Do you know what that great and terrible good man will decide? He will decide the wizarding world cannot risk it. He has sacrificed more than one child before for a greater good. Ask him sometime. Ask him about the things he wanted when he was young and hungry and clever. Ask him what he was willing to spend. I know, Harry. I have his measure. Go to Dumbledore, and you are asking a man who buries his own sins under mountains of mercy to decide whether one orphan's life is worth the certainty of my death. I would not like to be the orphan." Harry stood up. "We tell Dumbledore," he said, and his voice did not shake. And the clever voice went silent, and Hermione let out a breath she had been holding, and the two of them walked out of the library into the corridor, and that was when the screaming started. It came from the entrance hall, and it was not one voice but many, and Harry was moving before he had decided to. The low singing strength coming up his legs, and he was faster than Hermione, faster than anyone, and he came around the last corner into the entrance hall and stopped. A Dementor had come inside. It should not have been possible. They were bound to the gates, to the perimeter, warded from the school itself, and Harry would learn later that a door had been left open by a frightened prefect, and a memory had drawn it in. The memory of a boy weeping in a corner over a letter from home. A boy whose grief was thin enough and bright enough to pull a Soul Eater off its leash and through an open door. The Dementor had the boy backed against the wall of the entrance hall, hood down, gray hand out, the long dragging rattle of its breath filling the vaulted space, and the boy had gone limp and gray and was sliding down the wall with his soul coming up out of him in a thin silver thread toward the drinking dark, and there were students screaming and none of them could do a thing. Because none of them could cast the charm. Because most grown wizards never could, Harry could not cast it either. He had tried a dozen times and produced a silver king that called the dark instead of banishing it. He had one weapon in the world that would work on the thing in front of him, and he had spent all year keeping it in its box. And he had 4 seconds before the boy's soul came free, and he did the thing he had promised himself in the drowned chamber he would never choose to do. He looked at the Dementor and he woke the gaze. The voiceless gaze came up out of the dark behind his ribs where it had slept since the chamber, where the voice had told him it waited, dormant, to wake the gaze, claim more, and Harry had claimed more. 3 times over, and the gaze was awake now, whether he wanted it or not. The pressure gathered in the bridge of his nose and the roots of his teeth. The color came up out of the bottom of the pool and into his eyes, all the way to the center, all the way to the front. And Harry turned the full and open stare of the Basilisk King on the Dementor of Azkaban, and the oldest law of the chamber went out of him and struck the drinking dark, and the Dementor, which had no eyes but had, somewhere under the hood, the memory of eyes, met the gaze of a thing older and hungrier than itself. It stopped. The rattle cut off. The gray hand fell. And the Dementor, the tall drowned darkness that fed on every good thing and could not be killed by any charm a schoolboy knew, went gray from the inside the way Aunt Marge would have. The way anything the gaze fell upon went, its own kind of stone, its own kind of stillness, and it held for one endless instant, petrified in the middle of the entrance hall under the eyes of 40 screaming students. And then, because it was not truly a body, because it was cold given a shape, it did not crack and fall like a statue. It simply came apart, unraveling into the cold air it was made of, and where it had been there was nothing. And the boy against the wall gasped and pulled his thin silver soul back into himself and lived. The voice spoke. Boss soul absorbed, a Dementor of Azkaban. The second, the gaze has proven its worth. Well hunted, well hunted. Harry stood in the middle of the entrance hall with 40 students staring at him, at his eyes, at the color that was already sinking back down out of the front of them toward the bottom of the pool, and he felt the cost arrive. It was not the second Dementor's choir, though that came too, another ocean of the drowned pouring in behind his ribs to join the first. It was the other cost, the fuel, the conversion. And he felt it happen in real time for the first time, felt the engine reach into him to pay for what he had just done, felt it open a drawer of warmth and empty it, and he knew even as it went which drawer it chose, because the engine chose the brightest, and the brightest thing Harry had left, now that the broom and the candles and Hagrid's door were gone, was a Christmas. It was the first real Christmas of his life, his first at Hogwarts, the Weasley jumper and the snow and Ron's face and the feeling, entirely new to a boy raised in a cupboard, of being somewhere he was wanted. He felt the engine take it. He felt the warmth go out of it and the label stay. And when it was done, he could still recite that he had once had a happy Christmas, and he could no longer feel a single thing about it. And the boy against the wall was alive because of it. And Harry stood in the entrance hall and did the arithmetic and found that he did not regret the trade and was terrified that he did not regret it. Because not regret it was exactly the kind of thing the room at the end of all this would feel. INT duration, tertire 1%, the voice said, and went quiet. 9 points. 1 use of the gaze, 1 saved life, 9 points, a broom and candles and Hagrid's door and a Christmas all at once. And Harry understood that the powers were not free and had never been free, and that the more he used what he had taken to do good in the world, the faster the world would lose the person who had wanted to. Hermione reached him first. She took his arm, and she did not flinch from the sinking color in his eyes, and she said, "Lo, for him alone, you saved him, Colin. You saved Colin Creevy's life just now, and I watched you pay for it. I saw your face when it took whatever it took, and I want you to hear me. That was you. Whatever it cost, the choir doesn't save people. It ate a Dementor and called it hunting. But you saw a boy dying and you spent your own happiness to stop it, on purpose, knowing the price. And that is the most human thing I have ever seen anyone do." Her grip tightened. Hold on to that one. Don't let it burn, that one. If it comes for the memory of this, of choosing to save him, you fight it. Because that's the memory that proves the whole thing wrong. And Harry, standing in the wreck of the entrance hall with 2 oceans and a swarm and a king behind his ribs, and 31% of himself already converted to power, looked at his friend and found that he was, in fact, still capable of one warm human thing. Because he reached out and put his hand over hers on his arm, an ordinary human hand on an ordinary human hand, the smallest and most useless and most deliberate gesture he owned, and he said, "Thank you for not running." Dumbledore was already there. Harry did not see him arrive. The old man was simply in the hall, as he had been simply in the doorway of Myrtle's bathroom a year ago, moving through the crowd of students with the stillness that parted them, and his blue eyes went over the scene once, quickly, counting the living, and found the boy alive against the wall, and found the place where a Dementor had been and was not, and found Harry, standing in the center of it with the color sinking out of his eyes and Hermione's hand under his, and this time Dumbledore did not smile and fold the strangeness away. This time Dumbledore said quietly, so that only Harry and Hermione could hear it, "My office, both of you, now. I've been waiting a very long time for you to be ready to tell me, Harry, and I am afraid we have run out of the luxury of waiting for that. So instead, I am going to tell you. I am going to tell you what I have known and feared and failed to say, since the night you were 1 year old and I left you on a doorstep with a scar I recognized and a suspicion I could not prove." He turned, robes whispering on the stone. "Come, there is a great deal you need to understand before the number reaches a place from which no one can bring you back. And I must tell you at once, so that you do not hear it first from the thing inside you and believe its version. The piece of Lord Voldemort that has lived behind your scar since that night is not a secret I have just now discovered. It is a grief I have carried for 12 years, and I owe you every part of it." He walked, and Harry, with the whole crowded country of the claimed gone silent behind his ribs, silent the way a room goes silent when the one person who understands everything walks in, followed the headmaster up out of the entrance hall toward the truth, and behind him the clever voice, the author, the piece of the man who had killed his parents, said one last thing before Dumbledore's presence smothered it into quiet, and it did not sound urgent, now, and it did not sound clever. It sounded, for the first time in the whole long autumn, afraid. "He will tell you how to kill me," it said. "And he will not tell you the part where it kills you too. Ask him the second question, Harry. Always ask the old man the second question. The first answer is the mercy. The second answer is the truth. Dumbledore's office was warm and full of soft whirring silver, and Fawkes sat on his golden perch with his head under his wing until the door opened, and then the Phoenix lifted his head and looked at Harry and began, quietly, to sing. Harry felt it the moment the song started. The whole crowded country behind his ribs sank and went still and dim. The king and the two oceans and the swarm, all of them pressed down under the gold weight of the Phoenix song. And for the first time in weeks, Harry stood in a room and was only himself, oneself, looking out of two eyes, and the relief of it put water in his eyes that he blinked away before it could fall. Yes, Dumbledore said, watching him. Fawkes will sing for as long as we are here. It will not cure anything, but it will give us a little quiet in which to speak, in which the thing inside you cannot listen too closely. And I have found over a long life that quiet is the rarest and most valuable substance in the world, rarer than gold, rarer than time. He sat and gestured Harry and Hermione to the chairs across from him and folded his long hands, and the firelight ran along the half-moon glasses. I am going to tell you the truth now, Harry. All of it in order. And I am going to try very hard not to soften it, because I have softened things to you before, in the chamber and after, and each softening has cost you a piece of the time you needed. So, the truth. He told it plainly, and it was worse for being plain. He told Harry that on the night Voldemort's curse rebounded, the Dark Lord had already done to his own soul the darkest thing a wizard can do, more than once, splitting it and hiding the pieces, the diary among them, so that he could not truly die while any piece survived. And when the curse rebounded and his body was destroyed, the last shred of him, the ragged dying core, had done what such a thing does. It had fled the ruin, and found itself with nowhere prepared to go, no waiting vessel, no hidden object, and the only living thing in the wreckage of that house had been a 1-year-old with his mother's protection still warm on his skin. And the shred had done the only thing left to it. It had gone in through the wound it had just made, through the scar. You have carried a piece of him your whole life, Dumbledore said. I suspected it when I left you on the doorstep. I saw the shape of the scar, and I knew what shapes that curse leaves and does not leave, and I was afraid. But a suspicion is not a certainty, and a certainty would have meant deciding what to do about a child who might be the safest place in the world for a monster to hide, or might be the monster's front door. I chose to wait and to watch, and to hope that so long as the piece slept, you might grow up a boy and not a battlefield. His voice did not change, but something in his face did. I told myself it was mercy. It was also cowardice. I did not want to be the man who had to decide, and so I let you carry it, unwarned, into a school with a sealed chamber under it, and I did not think, because I did not let myself think, about what might happen if the two dark things ever met. Slytherin's machine, Hermione said quietly. And the piece of Voldemort. You didn't think about what would happen if they woke each other up. I did not permit myself to think of it, Dumbledore agreed. Which is a different and worse thing than not knowing. He looked at Harry. You have worked out most of the rest already, I think. Salazar Slytherin built an engine for a soul to grow without end by consuming other souls, and could not run it for one of a vessel that was both a parcel mouth and already divided. Lord Voldemort, when he was a schoolboy named Tom Riddle, went down into that chamber and found more than a snake. He found Slytherin's design. And I believe, though I cannot prove, that everything he did to his own soul afterward, all the splitting, all the hiding, was Slytherin's lesson learned wrong and turned inside out. The founder wanted to gather selves into one. The student learned only how to scatter oneself into many. Neither of them managed the thing they truly wanted, which was to never end. His eyes rested on Harry. And then you, Harry. You went down into the chamber carrying a piece of Riddle in your head and Riddle's diary bleeding on the floor. And you killed Slytherin's guardian with Slytherin's own conditions met in your person. And you completed, in one afternoon at the age of 12, the work of 1,000 years. You started the engine. And the piece of Voldemort behind your scar woke to find itself sitting at the exact controls it had spent a mortal lifetime searching for, in the head of the one boy in the world built to run them. The fire cracked. Fawkes sang on, low and steady. How do I stop it? Harry said. That is the first question, Dumbledore said, and I will answer it honestly. And the honest answer is that I do not fully know. But I know some things. The engine runs on your warmth, and it takes the brightest first. But there is one kind of warmth it cannot take, and I have staked a great deal of my hope on it. He leaned forward. It cannot burn love that is being given. Do you understand the difference? A happy memory is a warmth you hold. It can be reached into and emptied, as you have found. But love that is happening, love that is moving between two living people in the present moment, is not a stored thing to be drained. It is a fire that makes more of itself. Your mother did not save you with a memory, Harry. She saved you with an act, a warmth given in the instant, and it burned in her so brightly that it left a mark on you that Voldemort could not cross for 11 years. The engine has burned your Christmas and your first broom because those were warmths at rest. It has not touched, and I do not believe it can touch. The warmth that passed between you and Miss Granger in the entrance hall not 20 minutes ago when she put her hand on your arm and you put your hand on hers? Because that warmth was not stored. It was given, and a thing that is given cannot be stolen. Hermione had gone very still. Harry looked at his own hand. "So that is the first answer, the mercy," Dumbledore said. "Starve the engine of stored warmth by living, by giving, by refusing to hoard your happiness where it can be reached. Stop claiming souls, so that the number climbs only slowly, only by the daily cost of holding what you have. And surround yourself with love that is happening, so that when the engine reaches for fuel it finds more and more only fires it cannot burn. It may be enough. It may buy years. It may buy a life." Harry looked at the old man for a long moment. Then he asked the second question. "And if it isn't enough," he said. "If it keeps climbing anyway, if the number reaches 100, what then? What's the way to actually kill the piece of him all the way for certain? Not slow it, kill it. There's a way, isn't there? There's always a way, and you know it. And you led with the mercy, so I wouldn't ask for the truth." Fawkes's song faltered, one note, and steadied. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was very gentle and very tired and older than Harry had ever heard it. "A piece of a soul embedded in a living vessel," he said, "cannot be removed. It has grown into you the way a root grows into a wall. There is no spell, no potion, no ritual in any book in the restricted section or out of it that can separate the two of you at 31%, because at 31% you are no longer two things with a border, the only certain way that has ever been known to destroy a fragment of soul housed in a living body." He did not look away from Harry as he said it, and Harry loved him and hated him for not looking away. "Is to destroy the body. That is the second answer. That is the truth. If the mercy fails, if the engine reaches 100 despite everything, then the only sure way to stop Lord Voldemort from walking out of this castle wearing your face and your mother's eyes and the power of every soul you have taken is for that face and those eyes to stop. And I am telling you plainly, Harry, because you asked plainly, and because you deserve to know exactly what the thing inside you meant when it told you I would hide this. Yes, there is a version of the end of this in which the only way I can save the world from what you are becoming is to let it lose you. And I have spent 12 years praying I will not have to be the man who decides it. And I am not certain, even now, that I am strong enough to be that man, or wicked enough, or good enough, or whatever the word is for a person who could do such a thing to a child he has come to love." Nobody spoke. Fawkes sang, the silver instrument's word. "Then I won't leave it up to you," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. "I mean it." Harry sat forward, and behind his ribs, under the Phoenix song, the country of the claimed was pressed down and dim and could not fully hear him, and he was, for these few minutes, entirely and only himself. And he used the minutes. You keep talking about it like there are two ways this ends. The mercy, where I live small and careful and hope, or the truth, where the number wins and someone has to end me. But there's a thing neither of you has said out loud, and I've been sitting here waiting for one of you to say it, and you haven't, so I will." He looked from Dumbledore to Hermione and back. The engine doesn't care who wins. Slytherin built a machine to grow a self by eating selves, and Voldemort's piece assumes it'll be the one who grows, because it's the oldest thing in the room and it knows where all the controls are. But it's not the only self in the room. I'm in here too. It's my body, my name on the vessel. And the machine measures strength and coherence and will, and it hands the throne to whoever's got the most of those when the number hits 100. His voice was very steady. "So there's a third way. Not living small until it wins. Not dying so it can't. I stop letting it drive. I take the controls. I become the strongest, most coherent, most stubborn self in the room. And when the number reaches the top, the one sitting in the driver's seat is me, not him. I don't kill the machine. I take it. I become the author." The clever voice, far down, smothered under the Phoenix song, stirred for one instant, and what Harry felt from it was not triumph and not fear. It was interest. Sharp, cold, delighted interest. The interest of a thing that has just heard its pupils say something it did not expect and could not have said better itself. And that told Harry, more than anything Dumbledore had said, that he had found the real fight, because the piece of Voldemort in his head had spent all autumn steering him away from every idea except that one, and now that he had said it out loud, the author of the whole machine was, for the first time, paying attention to Harry as an equal. Hermione had been quiet for a long time, writing nothing now, only listening. And she spoke up at last, and her voice was not steady. But she made it work anyway. "There's a problem with taking the chair, Harry. A practical one. You keep saying you'll be the most coherent self in the room, but coherence isn't just being stubborn. I've read the same books you have and more. Slytherin's design measures how much of the hall pulls in one direction, and right now, the hall is full of things that hate you, or fear you, or want you dead. 10,000 drowned souls you took against their will, and a king you killed and a colony you murdered in a hollow. Why in the world would any of them pull your way instead of his? He's had 12 years to make them his. You've had a month, and everything you've done to them has been theft." She looked at him, fierce and frightened. "If you go up there to win a popularity contest among the souls you've stolen, you're going to lose. Because you've given them exactly as many reasons to choose you as he has. So before you do anything, you'd better work out what you can offer a hall full of the dead that he can't. Because if he answers nothing, then taking the chair isn't a plan. It's just a faster way to lose. Harry looked at her and something turned over in him because she had put her finger on the exact hollow at the center of his whole idea, the thing he had not let himself look at. She was right. He had nothing to offer the drown that domination could not offer better. Unless… His eyes went unfocused, and the beginning of a thought moved in him. A thought about doors. About the one function the voice had kept locked. Can I put them back? Can I let them go? Claim more? A thought he did not yet have the whole of but could feel the shape of. The way he had felt the sword in the hat before he knew what it was. You're right, he said slowly. I can't outtake him. So I won't try. I'll do the one thing he's never once done to any soul he's ever held. He did not finish it because he did not fully have it yet, but Hermione was watching his face and she nodded slowly, because whatever was starting behind his eyes, she trusted it more than she trusted the alternative. That is the most dangerous thing you have said in this room, Dumbledore said quietly. And I have been in this room while people said a great many dangerous things, including, once, myself. He studied Harry over the half-moon glasses. To take the machine rather than break it. To win the throne rather than empty it. Do you understand what that would make you, Harry? Even if you won. Even if it were your will and not his that sat in the driver's seat at the end, you would still be the thing at the center of a country of stolen souls. You would still have the king, and the oceans, and the swarm, and whatever else the number demands before it is done. You would be the most powerful wizard alive, built on 1,000 years of a founder's forbidden design, and the only difference between you and the thing you are fighting would be which of you was steering. That is a very small difference to stake a soul on. It's the difference between my mum and the curse, Harry said. You said it yourself. Same magic, same night, same house. One of them was warmth given, and one of them was warmth taken, and that small difference is the only reason I'm alive to be sitting here. Small differences are the whole thing. They're the only thing. If the only difference at the end is that it's me steering and I'm still choosing the warm, useless human stuff on purpose, then that's not a small difference. That's everything. That's the entire war in one seat, and I'd rather fight for the seat than let you empty the car with me still in it. Dumbledore was silent. Then, slowly, he inclined his head, not in agreement, Harry thought, but in something older than agreement. The acknowledgement one gives a person who has decided to carry a weight you would have spared them, and cannot be talked out of it. Then we prepare you for the seat, he said. Fawkes will teach you the song as much as a man can learn it, so that you can find your own quiet without a phoenix in the room. Remus will teach you the passenger, because he has ridden one for 30 years and never once let it drive. Miss Granger will do the thing she does better than anyone I have taught in 50 years, which is refuse to let a friend lie to himself. And he rose, and Fawkes lifted from the perch and came to his shoulder, still singing, I will teach you the only thing I know that might matter more than all of it, which is how a good person keeps hold of the difference between the throne and the man who sits in it, because I very nearly failed that lesson myself, a long time ago, and the failing of it is the great grief of my life, and I would give a great deal to make sure you do not repeat it. He looked down at Harry, and his eyes were wet, and he did not pretend they were not. The number is at 31. We do not know how much time that buys. So we begin tonight. And Harry, the old man's voice caught and steadied, whatever waits at the top of that number, whichever of us proves strong enough to sit in the seat, I want you to know that you were never, for one moment, only a vessel to me. You were a boy I failed by loving too carefully and warning too late. Let me spend whatever time we have loving you less carefully. Fawkes sang, and Harry Potter sat in the warm, bright office with the country of the claimed pressed down behind his ribs and 31% of himself already turned to power, and looked at the old man who had told him the whole truth at last, and made the decision that would carry him into the last and worst night of his 3rd year, that he would not live small, and he would not die to make it simple, and he would go up into the machine after the peace of the man who murdered his parents, and he would take the throne, and he would keep the difference, and he would do it in self, warm and human, all the way up to 100 if that was what it. Ron was awake when they came back to the tower. He was sitting in the last armchair by the dead fire with his knees up and his arms around them, and he had clearly been there for hours, and when the portrait swung open and Harry and Hermione climbed through, he stood up so fast the chair rocked. Don't, he said, before either of them could speak. Don't tell me you're both fine and it was nothing. Colin Creevey is in the hospital wing telling everyone that Harry's eyes went the color of the chamber and a Dementor came apart looking at him. I've spent all year watching you two go quiet whenever I come around a corner. Hermione's been in the restricted section so much Madame Pince asked me if she'd moved in. His ears were red, the way they went when he was frightened and covering it with temper. So don't. Just tell me. Whatever it is. I followed you down a hole in the ground last year with a broken wand and a car. I think I've earned it. Harry looked at his friend. Behind his ribs, the clever voice, awake again now that they were out from under the Phoenix song, said, cold and quick, he'll run. They always run. Tell him a comfortable lie and keep him. A frightened friend is still a friend. A friend who knows the truth is a witness. And Harry heard it and recognized it for what it was. The author's voice. The piece of the man who had never in his life had a friend he did not use, and Harry did the exact opposite of what it said, on purpose, which was the whole of the art Lupin had taught him. He told Ron everything. Standing there by the dead fire at 2 in the morning, the whole of it, the voice and the chamber and the number and the choir and the piece of Voldemort and his scar and the machine and the throne he meant to take, all of it holding nothing back. And Ron's face went through a great many things while he listened and settled at the end, not on fear. "Okay," Ron said. "Okay," Harry said. "That's it. You've just been told your best mate's got a bit of you-know-who growing a body inside him and might turn into him by summer, and the answer's okay? No, the answer's I'm terrified and I'm going to be sick later and I want my mom," Ron said. "But not at you, you great idiot. At it. At the thing doing it to you." He scrubbed a hand through his hair. "You spent all year thinking I'd run. That's what's got me, actually. That's the bit that stings. You looked at me and Hermione and you decided we'd bolt if we knew. So you carried it on your own and let it eat your happy Christmas, when the whole time..." His voice cracked and he shoved through it. "The whole time you had 2 people right here who'd have carried it with you. That's the daftest thing you've ever done, and you flew a car into a tree." And that was the moment Harry felt it. Behind his ribs, the engine reached for fuel, the way it did now, always, hungry, and it opened a drawer looking for a warmth to burn, and it found this one, this exact one, happening right now. Ron standing in the firelight, furious and loyal and afraid and refusing to run. Hermione beside him, with her jaw set, the 2 of them choosing him out loud, and the engine reached for the warmth of it and could not take hold. It slid off. It was not a stored thing. It was a fire making more of itself, given freely in the present tense, between 3 living people at 2 in the morning, and the machine that had eaten his broom, and his candles and his first Christmas closed on it and came away with nothing. And the number, for the first time all year, did not move. Harry felt it not move. He reached for the voice, and it told him, flat and merciless and, he thought, very slightly baffled, "Integration, 31%. And then, after a pause, a line it had never printed before, "Warm to gedepted vor. Warm to gedepted. You nebble to convert. Sonsage. External, living, ongoing. Filing as anomaly. Anomaly." Harry almost laughed. Dumbledore had been right. There was a fuel the engine could not burn, and it was not a memory, and it was not a thing you could hoard against the winter. It was not a thing you could hoard against the winter. It was 2 friends refusing to leave you alone with the worst thing in your life, and the machine did not have a drawer for it, and did not know what to do with it, and filed it, helplessly, as an error. "I'm sorry," Harry said, to both of them, "for thinking you'd run." "Yeah, well..." Ron sat back down in the armchair because his legs had clearly had enough. And after a second, Harry and Hermione sat too, the 3 of them around the cold hearth in the dark. "You can make it up to me by not turning into a Dark Lord. Low bar. I believe in you." He said it like a joke, because that was how Ron said the things he meant most, and Harry took it like one. And the clever voice behind his ribs was silent and sullen and, Harry thought, afraid, because it had spent all autumn convincing him he was alone, and in one conversation by a dead fire the whole architecture of that lie had come down, and the author of the machine had just learned that its vessel had found the one fuel it could not steal, and would spend the rest of the war trying to give it away faster than the engine could climb. Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Author's Chair. The cold came across the lake an hour after midnight, and he came all at once, the way a tide comes in over flat sand, faster than a person can walk. Harry felt it from the tower before the bell began. He had been awake because he was always awake now, lying in the dark doing the thing Dumbledore had taught him, filling the quiet with warmths that were happening rather than warmths at rest. Ron snoring 3 beds over. The memory of Hermione's hand under his in the entrance hall made new by choosing to feel it now instead of storing it. The engine behind his ribs had held at 31 for 11 days, and Harry had spent those days getting ready for a fight he could feel coming without knowing its shape. Lupin had taught him the passenger. Every evening that fortnight they had met in the classroom with the wardrobe, and Lupin had shown him the discipline of 30 years. The trick of it, which was not strength and was not spells, but a kind of stubborn daily bookkeeping of the self. "This is me. The wolf does not make tea. The wolf does not laugh at that joke. Therefore I am not the wolf." Harry had learned to keep the ledger, to mark the border of himself 100 times a day, and by the end of the 11 days, he could feel the difference between his own thoughts and the clever voices the way you feel the difference between your own hand and a stranger's in the dark. And the clever voice had hated it and had gone quiet, and Harry had mistaken the quiet for retreat, when it had only been the fragment saving its strength for the sea it had already called. Dumbledore had taught him the chair, not with spells, with stories mostly, told in the warm office with Fawkes on the perch. Stories about a young man who had been clever and hungry and gifted and certain, once, long ago, that some people were meant to rule and others to be ruled, and who had wanted power the way a thirsty man wants water for the best of reasons, for a sister he had failed and a world he meant to fix. Dumbledore had not said the young man's name, and Harry had not needed him to. "I learned the difference too late to save someone I loved," the old man had said one night, looking into the fire. "The difference between holding power and being held by it. I am trying to teach it to you early enough. It is the only apology I have that is worth anything." And Harry had understood that Dumbledore was giving him a thing more useful than any charm, which was the map of a wrong turn drawn by a man who had taken it. And Fawkes had taught him the song. Every day Harry had sat with the phoenix and listened and reached for the shape of the song the way he reached for the voice. And slowly, imperfectly, he had begun to be able to make a little of the quiet himself. A hummed few notes of gold that pressed the crowded hall behind his ribs down for a minute at a time. Without a bird in the room, he was not good at it. But he was not nothing at it, and on the 11th night, lying in the dark, he had made the quiet on his own for almost a whole minute, and had thought, very carefully, that maybe there was a version of this that ended with him alive and himself, and he had begun, against all his own advice, to hope. Then the cold rolled in across the water, and every warm thing in the castle guttered at once, and Harry was out of bed and at the window with his heart doing the thing it did, and he looked out at the black lake with the heat sight and the devourer's eye both open, and he saw them. Not 3, not 30. The whole of Azkaban had come to Hogwarts. Hundreds of Dementors poured across the lake in a low black tide, gliding, silent, their cold drinking the warmth out of the water so that frost bloomed on the surface behind them in a spreading white scar, and they were not spread out hunting. They were converging. On one point. On the castle. On the tower. On Harry. He felt their attention find him through stone and distance the way iron filings find a magnet, hundreds of hooded heads turning as one, and the recognition that came off them was the same recognition the 3 at the gate had given him, only multiplied into something vast and terrible and glad. "The king is woken," said the cold, in no voice, in every voice. "The king is in the high stone. We have felt him all the long year, tasting our brothers, taking them into himself one and one and one. And we have come, all of us, from the sea, to be taken. To be one. Come down, king. Come down to the water and finish it." And behind Harry's ribs the clever voice woke, and it was not sullen now, and it was not afraid, and it did not pretend to be a friend. It laughed, low and delighted, and Harry understood in that laugh that this was the play, that this had always been the play, that the piece of Voldemort had spent 11 quiet days letting him hope precisely so that the Horde's arrival would land like the end of the world instead of the middle of a plan. "I called them," it said. "Did you like the 11 days? I thought you'd earned a little hope. It makes the drop so much better. Yes, Harry, I called them, all the way from the North Sea, using your voice, using the beacon you have been for a year without knowing it. Every Dementor you took made the light of you brighter, and they have been swimming toward it since October, and now they are here, hundreds of them, an ocean of them, and every single one is a soul the machine will let you claim. And if you take them, Harry, if you go down to that water and open the door and let them pour in the way you let the first one pour in on the train, do you know what the number does?" Harry knew what the number did. "It goes to 100, the voice said, gently, warmly, in the tone it had learned from him. "All at once. Tonight. And then, dear boy, we find out which of us has the stronger claim to the chair. And I will tell you a secret, because I've grown fond of you, in my way, the way a man grows fond of a good house he intends to move into. I've been sitting in that chair since you were 1 year old. I know every inch of it. And you have known it exists for a month. When the number reaches the top and the machine hands the throne to the most coherent self in the room, it is not going to be the frightened schoolboy who found the controls in October. It is going to be me." Down at the lake, the black tide reached the shore and began to climb. Harry ran. He ran down through the sleeping castle, and he was faster than he had ever been, the low singing strength of a claimed king in his legs. And Dumbledore was already moving through the entrance hall when Harry reached it. And Lupin behind him, gray-faced with his wand out, and McGonagall shouting the older students back up the stairs, and the whole castle waking to a cold it could not fight. Dumbledore turned as Harry came down the last flight, and their eyes met, and Harry did not have to say it. "How many?" Dumbledore said. "All of them." Harry's voice did not shake. It called them. The piece of him. It's been calling them since October. They've come to be taken. It wants me to take them, all at once, so the number maxes tonight, and it can grab the chair in the chaos. That's the whole plan. That's what the 11 quiet days were for. He was already moving toward the great doors, toward the cold, and Dumbledore fell in beside him, and Lupin on his other side. And for one strange moment the 3 of them walked toward the end of it together like something out of a story. "I have to go down there." "You do not," Dumbledore said sharply. "That is exactly what it wants, Harry. You have just told me so yourself. You must not." "I know it's what it wants." Harry stopped at the doors and the cold pressed against the wood from the other side, and through it he could feel the horde flooding up the lawn, and behind them at the tree line, the small terrified warmths of 2 students who had been out past curfew and were now caught between the castle and the sea, going gray, going down. Colin Creevey, he thought, and a first-year girl whose name he did not know, and 40 seconds, maybe less. But it made one mistake. It planned the whole night around forcing me up the number so it could take the chair. It never once planned for the chair being taken by me. It can't imagine it. It's the piece of a man who's never in his life shared a room he didn't own. So it built me a trap with a door in the back it doesn't know is there, because the door is a thing it's never used. He put his hand on the great cold doors. "I'm going down. I'm going to take them, all of them, and a number's going to the top, and then I'm going into the room after him, and I'm going to win the chair. And I need you both to do one thing for me, because I can't do it, and the other thing at once. Name it, Lupin said. When I go down, Harry's jaw did the thing it did. My body's going to be standing at the water not doing anything, because all of me is going to be inside fighting for the seat. I'll be defenseless, so keep me alive, whatever comes. Whatever it looks like when the number hits 100 and you can't tell for a minute which of us is driving. Keep the body breathing, and keep everyone else back. And Professor, he looked at Dumbledore, if it's him who walks back out of me at the end, if the eyes come up cold and stay cold, then you do the thing you told me about in your office. You don't hesitate. You promised me the truth in that room. That's the truth I'm holding you to. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment, and his eyes were wet, and he said, I will keep you alive, and I will pray to whatever listens that I am not called upon to keep the other promise. He raised his wand, and Fawkes came down out of the dark of the entrance hall in a streak of gold and settled on Harry's shoulder, and began to sing, Fawkes goes with you, not to fight, to remind you, when you are in there and it is wearing your voice and telling you that you have already lost, which one you are. The song will reach you even in the room. Follow it home. Harry pushed the great doors open, and the cold came in like the sea. He walked down the lawn into the horde. They did not touch him. That was the thing the two caught students saw and told afterward and were not believed. Harry Potter walked out of the castle into a tide of hundreds of Dementors, and the tide parted around him, hoods bowing, gray hands lowering, an ocean of the drowning dark opening a path to the water for its king. And Harry walks down the path they made with a phoenix singing on his shoulder, and he came to the two students where they had fallen gray against the boathouse wall, and he stood over them, and he turned and faced the sea of Dementors, and he opened the door. He did not do it the way the fragment wanted. That was the first move of the fight, and he made it before he was even in the room. The fragment wanted him to take them the way he had taken the first, greedily, a starving mouth at a flood. Instead, Harry opened the door the way you open your arms, and he thought, to all of them, in the old cold grammar of the king they had come to serve, come home. And they came, hundreds of them, all at once. The whole of Azkaban's cold pouring in through the open door in Harry Potter, and it was the most enormous thing that had ever happened to him. An ocean going into a cup. There should have been no room. That was the thing that a smaller Harry, the Harry of the train, would have expected, that a boy cannot hold an ocean, that the vessel would burst. But the hall behind his ribs was not a cup. It was Lessing, Edwardmo, Rafine. Was Laurie sing in the dark of him to make room, and Harry stood on the frozen shore with hundreds of the drowned dark streaming into him and felt himself become, for a few seconds, something the size of the sky, cold and vast and starred, with 10,000 small lights that were the last thoughts of the taken, and it was terrible, and it was beautiful. And it was the single most dangerous moment of his life, because for the date, when it which would regen might for light, my god, the two caught students gasped and color came back into their gray faces as the Dementors that had been feeding on them unraveled into the cold air and streamed into Harry instead, and the voice, screaming now, louder than it had ever been, loud enough that the frost on the grass cracked, printed the number as it climbed, loud enough that the frost on the grass cracked, printed the number as it climbed. Integration, 40%, 50, warning, 70. The vessel cannot hold, 80. The share is contested, 9net, warning, 9net T5, 9net. The lawn went away. Harry was in the room. It was not a room. He had called it a closet once, in the chamber, a small dark space behind the ribs. He had called it a room when the Dementors' choir came. He had called it a country in the forest with the swarm. It was none of those. It was a hall, a vast one, vaulted like the chamber and lit like the great hall and cold like Azkaban and deep like the lake. A hall built by Salazar Slytherin 1,000 years ago to hold one growing self, and it was full. The drowned stood in their thousands, rank on rank, faint and gray, the whole choir given shape. The Basilisk king coiled along the length of it, 30 feet of bruise-colored muscle, watching with eyes that were sockets. The swarm hung in the high vaults, 100 glinting eyes in the dark. 2 oceans of Dementors seethed at the edges, and at the far end of the hall, on a raised place, in a chair carved from the same green stone as the chamber, sat a young man of 16 with dark hair and a handsome face and eyes that had gone entirely, evenly, patiently red. "Hello, Harry," said Tom Riddle. "Welcome to your head. I've kept it tidy." He rose from the chair, and he was not the diary's riddle. The smooth schoolboy memory Harry had stabbed with a fang. This was the piece that had ridden in the scar for 12 years, older and colder and vastly more real, grown fat on a year of Harry's warmth, and he stepped down off the raised place and spread his hands to take in the crowded hall. "Do you like what we've built?" he said. "I say we. I mean you, mostly. You did all the hunting. I only steered here and there on the nights you were tired. But look at it, Harry. A king, 2 oceans, a swarm, 10,000 of the drowned. All the power in the world gathered into one hall, exactly as Salazar dreamed it, and only one chair. He made only one chair." Riddle smiled, and it fit his face perfectly, the way it had never quite fit the diaries. "And I have been sitting in it since before you could walk." You cannot take a chair from a man who is already sitting in it. That is not how chairs work. That is not how anything works. Sit down at my feet, boy, where you belong, and let me stand up into the body you have so kindly prepared, and I will make you a promise. I will let you watch. From in here. Forever. It is more than I gave your mother. Harry did not sit down. He looked at the chair, and at the crowded hall, and at the 10,000 drowned standing rank on rank. And he understood, standing there with Fawkes's song threading faint and gold through the cold air of his own skull, that the fragment had made the same mistake it had made all year. The mistake it could not help making because it was a piece of a man who had scattered his own soul into 7 jars rather than let one other living thing share it. Riddle thought the fight was for the chair. Riddle thought coherence meant domination, meant the strongest tyrant in the hall standing over the rest with a whip. It was how he had always ruled. It was the only way he knew a room could be held. But Slytherin had not built the machine to make a tyrant. Harry had read Hermione's parchment 100 times. Slytherin had built it to gather selves into one. And the machine measured coherence, and coherence was not domination. Coherence was the opposite of domination. A soul scattered into 7 jars was the least coherent thing in the world, and a hall of 10,000 drowned, held down under a tyrant's heel, hating him, was not oneself. It was 10,000 prisoners and a jailer, and the machine, Slytherin's machine, the honest engine at the bottom of all of it, would never, ever hand the throne to a jailer. Because a jail is not a self. It only looked like the fragment had the chair. The fragment had a cell block and had mistaken it for a throne for 12 years, because it had never once in its existence been anything but alone. You're right, Harry said. You can't take a chair from a man who's already sitting in it. He walked down the length of the hall, past the coiled king, under the swarm, through the ranks of the drowned, toward the raised place and the red-eyed thing standing before it. So I'm not going to take the chair. I'm going to make the room decide who it belongs to. And the room, Tom, is full of everyone you've been standing on. He stopped in front of the first rank of the drowned. The woman was there. The one with the name. He knew her at once, though he had only ever heard her, a gray shape in the front rank saying a stranger's name gently to no one. Over and over, the way she had said it in the cold for an age of the world. The way she had said it since the night on the train when Harry took her along with all the rest. Harry stopped in front of her, and he did the thing the fragment had never once done in 12 years. Or Voldemort in 70, the thing that was not in their grammar, the thing the machine had been waiting 1,000 years for someone to do. He gave her something. I know your name isn't the one you keep saying, Harry said to her gently. That's someone you loved. I've been carrying you since October, and I never once asked you yours. I'm sorry. I let you scream in the dark under my ribs, and I called you fuel. He held out his hand. I can't put you back the way you were, I asked. That function was locked, but I'm the author now, or I'm about to be, and the first thing I'm going to do with the chair, if you'll help me get to it, is unlock it and let you go. Not take you, not keep you, not keep you. Let you go, to wherever the name you keep saying went. That's the offer. It's the opposite of the one I've been making all year. Nothing expires, but this one you get to say yes to. The gray woman stopped saying the name. For the first time in an age of the world, she stopped, and she looked at Harry, truly looked, and behind her, all through the ranks, 10,000 of the drowned stopped their endless loops, and looked, because someone had spoken to them, because in all the years the Dementor had held them, and all the months Harry had carried them, no one had ever once spoken to them, as though they were people and not weather. And Harry turned in the middle of the hall, and he spoke to all of them, 10,000 gray faces, and Fawkes's song rose gold behind his voice. I've been where you are, he said, held in the dark under someone who called me fuel. He's standing right there. He's held me for 12 years the way the Dementors held you. And he's held you the way he held me. And he thinks that's the same as being king. It isn't. I'm not going to hold you. I'm going to free you, every one of you, the moment I sit in that chair. That's my whole reign. That's the entire kingdom I want. A door held open instead of a cell held shut. So I'm asking, because it turns out asking is the thing he can't do and I can. Whose room is this? His, who stood on you for years and called it a throne. Or mine, who's going to open the door? The drowned turned from Riddle to Harry, 10,000 gray faces turning as one. And the machine, Salazar Slytherin's honest engine, felt the coherence of the hall shift all at once. Felt 10,000 selves align not around the tyrant who dominated them, but around the one who had offered them the door, and coherence, true coherence, a hall becoming oneself by consent. Poured toward Harry Potter, and the green stone chair at the end of the hall turned. Slowly, the way a compass turns. To face him, the king moved too. Harry felt it before he saw it. The vast coiled length of the basilisk shifting along the floor of the hall, and he understood that this was the moment the fragment had been counting on, because the Serpent King was the oldest and coldest thing in the room after Riddle himself, 1,000 years of patient killing, the one soul in the hall that might side with a tyrant out of sheer old kinship of appetite. Riddle turned toward it, and Harry felt him reach for it, felt him try to command it the only way he knew. Take, dominate, mine. and the king lifted its ruined head and turned its socket eyes not to the red-eyed thing that was ordering it, but to the one who had killed it in a drowned chamber. And then, tonight, spoken to 10,000 of the drowned as though they were people, Harry did not command it. He had learned better than that. He only looked at it, the thing he had killed, the first of all of it. And he thought, at it, in the old cold grammar it understood, you don't have to stay. The door's open for you too if you want it. And the king held his gaze for a long moment, the moment the fragment needed and did not get, and then it lowered its great head, once, and did not go to the door, and did not go to Riddle, but coiled itself around the base of the green stone chair, and waited there, a guardian again, a guardian by choice this time, for the one it had decided was worth guarding. The swarm chose in the high dark of the vaults, 100 glinting eyes turning as one from Riddle to Harry, and settling. 2 oceans of dementors. What was left of them after the freed streamed out, drew back from the tyrant and pulled at Harry's feet like water finding its level. The hall was choosing rank by rank and soul by soul. And it was not choosing the strongest. It was choosing the one who had asked. Now, said Riddle. And it was the diary's scream again. The 16-year-old scream. The sound of a thing feeling the warmth it stole torn back out of it. No, they are mine, I took them. Possession is the whole of the law. I took them. You took them, Harry agreed, walking toward the chair, and the drowned parted for him and closed behind him, ranks of the gray dead falling into step at his back. That's exactly the problem. You only ever know how to take. And Salazar didn't build a machine for taking, Tom. He built one for making many into one, and you can't make anything one. You're the least one thing that's ever lived. You're a man in 7 jars, and the machine has known that about you since October, and it's been waiting, this whole time, for the vessel to figure out the one thing you never could. Harry reached the raised place. The red-eyed thing stood between him and the chair, and it was smaller now, thinner, the drowned no longer feeding it with their hate, because their hate had turned to attention and their attention had turned to Harry. You don't hold a room by standing on it. You hold it by giving it a reason to stand with you. My mum knew that. She held me against the worst curse in the world for 11 years, with a thing you can't take and can't understand. And I've got it too, and it's been down at that lake this whole time, keeping my body breathing. 3 people who won't leave me alone with the worst thing in my life, and it's the anomaly, Tom. It's the fuel your machine can't burn. It's the reason I win. He walked through the piece of Voldemort like it was cold air, because that was what it had become. A cold with no soul left standing with it, and he sat down in the chair. The hall changed. The voice, which had been the machine's voice all year, calm and merciless and other, spoke one more time, and it was different now, because Harry was in the chair, and the voice of a machine, when you are the one sitting at its controls, is only your own voice, thinking clearly. A Hugh Tertiary, transferred, host, Harry James Potter. The chair is held by consent, not consquanquashed. Tofking Uration is the one the Beholder intended and never achieved. Functions unlocked, all. Harry sat in the author's chair with the whole crowded hall of his own soul stretched out before him, and for the first time, he was not outnumbered in it, because he was not standing over it. He was its center by consent. And he reached out, as author, and did the first act of his reign, the only one he had promised. He opened the door. He unlocked the function that had been locked since the train, the one the machine had denied him at 12%. Can I put them back? Can I let them go? And he found it, and he opened it, and he stood from the chair and turned to the 10,000 drowned and said, go home, all of you. Whatever's on the other side of the names you've been saying, go to it. You're not fuel and you're not mine. You're free. The door's open. Go. And they went. It was the most beautiful thing Harry had ever seen, and he was seeing it inside his own head, which he would never be able to explain to anyone. 10,000 gray shapes lifting, brightening, the endless loops breaking, the last thoughts finishing at last and last are, but not gently this time, but joyfully. The way you say a name when the person it belongs to walks back into the room, and then she was gold and then she was gone, and all of them followed, 10,000 lights going up and out through the vaults of the hall, streaming free, and the hall grew brighter and warmer as it emptied, and the cold that had been Azkaban went out of Harry Potter all once released, and very far ballet vorticalicantheot with or catchadstall eye, and the fragment of Voldemort. Thin now, red-eyed, backed against the wall of the hall where the chair's new light reached it. You could have ruled them, Riddle whispered. You had them. You had all of them. And you opened the door and let a fortune walk out into nothing. You are a fool, Harry Potter. You are your mother's kind of fool. You had the most power any wizard has ever held, and you gave it away in the first minute you owned it. I gave away the part that was people, Harry said. I kept the part that was mine. He looked at the coiled king and the swarm, and he thought about them differently now that he sat in the chair, now that the choosing was his. The basilisk chose to stay, so did the swarm. I felt it just now. They're not prisoners, not anymore. They're not fuel. They're just power that's decided it doesn't mind belonging to me. And that's allowed? That's the difference. That's the whole difference. He turned back to the thin red-eyed thing against the wall. And you don't get a chair, and you don't get a door, because the door I opened was for the ones who wanted to go home. and you don't have one. You burned yours down 70 years ago when you cut yourself into pieces. So here's what happens to you, Tom. I'm the author now, and I'm evicting you." "You cannot," Riddle said. And now the fear was total. "We are grown together," the old man told you. 31%, 95. "We are one flesh. You cannot cut me out without cutting yourself," he told you. "To destroy the fragment, you must destroy the—" "He was right about the old way," Harry said. "There's no spell to cut you out. No potion, no ritual. Because cutting is your kind of magic, Tom, and cutting me to get you was always going to kill us both. But I'm not cutting you out." He stood from the chair, and behind him, Fox's song swelled, and the light of 10,000 freed souls still hung warm in the emptying hall. And Harry walked toward the piece of the man who had murdered his parents, with no weapon at all. "I'm doing a thing you can't survive, which is the same thing that just emptied this hall. I'm giving. The machine runs on warmth. You've been stealing mine for a year to stay solid. And I've just opened every door in this place and filled it up with the warmest thing there is. 10,000 souls going free, and my mum's kind of love and a phoenix singing, and there's no cold left in here for you to hide in, Tom. No dark corner, no gray rank of the drowned to disappear into. You're the only cold thing left in a room that just filled up with light, and you can't stand it. You never could." The fragment tried, at the last, the only move it had never tried, because it had never in its existence needed to. It stopped commanding. It stopped threatening. It made itself small and reasonable, and it offered. "Keep them," it said quickly, the red eyes darting. "You've won, I concede it. The chair's yours, I saw it turn. But don't be a fool twice in one night. You're about to open the door and throw away 10,000 souls, the greatest gathering of power any wizard has ever held. And for what? For a warm feeling? For your dead mother's approval? Keep them. Rule them kindly, if that's what lets you sleep. Be a gentle king, I don't care, only don't empty the hall. Think what we could do with it, you and I. I would serve you, Harry. Do you understand what I am offering? Lord Voldemort in your head, at your command, and an army of the dead at your back, and the whole world made to make sense at last. We could stop all of it, every dark thing, every cruelty. We would be strong enough to simply forbid it. Isn't that worth 10,000 souls who are already dead and won't miss the difference? And for one heartbeat, standing in the vast bright hall with the chair behind him and the power still humming in his hands, Harry felt the offer land somewhere real, because it was not entirely a lie. That was the horror of the fragment at its best. It wove the truth through the poison so you could not pull one out without the other. He could do good with this. Enormous good. He could be the gentle king. Every tyrant who had ever lived had told himself exactly that, on exactly this threshold, and Harry knew it, and knew that knowing it was the only thing that saved him, because Dumbledore had drawn him the map of this precise wrong turn in a warm office by a fire, the difference between holding power and being held by it. And Harry stood on the turn and did not take it. "That's the best thing you've ever said to me," Harry told the fragment. "And it's the worst, because you almost mean it, don't you? You really think you'd forbid the cruelty? That's how it always starts. That's how it started for a man Dumbledore loved once." He shook his head. "The drowned aren't an army. They're people who died saying names. And I'm not keeping them to do good, because the second I keep a single soul that wants to go home, I'm you, gentle or not. There's no kind version of a cage." He reached the fragment. It shrank back, red eyes wide, thin as a shadow at noon. "This is my house," Harry said. "Get out." And he did the smallest, warmest, most human thing he had, on purpose, the thing Lupin had taught him by a wrecked wardrobe, the thing the fragment had spent a year steering him away from, the thing that drew the line. "This is me. The tyrant does not do this." He looked at the piece of the thing that had taken everything from him, and instead of hate, which would have fed it, instead of fear, which would have fed it, he felt deliberately, with enormous effort, for one clean instant, something close to pity. For the boy in the diary who had grown up in an orphanage unloved. For the man who was so afraid of dying that he had cut himself into 7 pieces and called it living. For the cold thing against the wall that had never once, in 70 years, been led into a room where the fire was warm. The pity landed on the fragment like light on frost. It could not bear it, hate it could eat, and fear it could wear. But a warmth given freely to the thing you have most reason to hate is the one substance in creation that a piece of Lord Voldemort cannot metabolize, cannot answer, cannot survive. And the fragment came apart the way the diary had come apart under the fang, screaming, unraveling, the red light pouring out of the holes in it, except this time there was no ink and no body. Only the last cold shred of a scattered soul boiling away in the light of a hall it could no longer darken, and its scream thinned, and Harry felt it torn loose from the place behind his scar where it had ridden since he was 1 year old, felt it flee, not destroyed. He would understand that later. A thing in 7 pieces cannot be destroyed by evicting one of them. But gone from him, out of the vessel, screaming away into the dark to find whatever other cold place in the world would still have it. And Harry Potter woke up on a frozen lawn by a black lake with a phoenix on his shoulder, and Dumbledore's hand on his chest, and his own 2 eyes looking out of his own one head, and the scar on his forehead, for the first time in his memory, did not hurt at all. He sat up. The horde was gone. The lawn was white with cracked frost and empty of dementors, all of them unraveled, released, gone home into whatever waited past the names, and the 2 students by the boathouse were sitting up gray and shaking and alive, and Lupin was between them and the lake with his wand out, and tears frozen on his face, and Dumbledore knelt beside Harry with his blue eyes searching, looking for the color at the bottom of the pool. It was not there. Harry felt him not find it. Green, Dumbledore said, and his voice broke on the word, all the way down. Springleaf green, and nothing looking up from the bottom of it. Only you. He put his other hand on Harry's shoulder over the phoenix. Only you, Harry. What did you do? I took the chair. Harry's voice came out rough. He was so tired. He was tired all the way down, in a place that had nothing to do with muscle. And then I opened the door and let everyone go, and I evicted him. He looked up at the old man. He's not dead. You should know that. You can't kill a thing in 7 pieces by getting one of them out of your head. He's out there. He'll find somewhere. He'll come back someday, the real way, the outside way. And when he does, he'll remember that a 12-year-old threw him out of his own head with a phoenix and a bit of pity. And he'll hate me for it more than he's ever hated anyone. Harry almost smiled, and this time, for the first time in a year, he actually managed it, small and exhausted and real. But not tonight. Tonight I've got my head to myself. First time since I was 1. And it's very quiet in here. Integration, said the voice in his skull, and it was only his own voice now. Clear and calm. And his stable. 31%. No longer rising. The Enjon is yours. It will tack nothing you do not give. 31%. It had spiked to 95 in the taking and settled back to 31 in the freeing because he had given 10,000 souls away and kept only what had chosen to stay, and it was not rising, and it would take nothing he did not give, and Harry sat on the frozen lawn and did the arithmetic one last time and found, at the bottom of it, a boy. Changed. Powerful in ways no 13-year-old had ever been. Carrying a king and a swarm that had decided they did not mind belonging to him. But a boy, warm, tired. His own, with his mother's green eyes clean all the way to the center and a scar that did not hurt. Ron and Hermione came pelting down the lawn in their pajamas with McGonagall shouting after them, and they reached him and did not stop. Hermione crashing into him with her arms around his neck, and Ron gripping his shoulder hard enough to bruise, and Harry felt the engine reach, out of a year of habit for the warmth of it, and slide off, and file it, helplessly, as an anomaly, and he laughed out loud on the frozen lawn. Because he was going to spend the rest of his life feeding that machine, a fuel it could never burn, and it was going to spend the rest of its liable hair at air. You're crying, Ron said. I'm not, Harry said. Who was? He is, said Hermione into his shoulder. Who was too? Fawkes lifted off Harry's shoulder and rose into the cold dark over the lake, singing, and the song was not holding a door shut anymore, because there was no door that needed holding, and it rose free and gold over the water where an ocean of the dead had gone home, and Dumbledore stood with his hands still on Harry's shoulder and listened to it. An old man who had told the whole truth at last and been spared the worst of it, and did not try to hide that he was weeping either. In the hospital wing, in the gray hours before dawn, Madame Pomfrey filled him with chocolate and outrage in equal measure, and then left him alone, and Dumbledore drew a chair to the side of his bed and sat, and for a while neither of them said anything, which Harry was learning was its own kind of conversation with the old man. You'll want to know what happens now, Dumbledore said at last. Whether I am obliged to tell the Ministry that a 13-year-old boy holds a sole engine of Salazar Slytherin's design and commands a portion of the dead, whether there will be men from the Department of Mysteries and Questions, and a small locked room. He folded his hands. I have decided that I am not obliged to tell them anything of the sort, and that if any of them come asking, they will find me a very forgetful old man. You have earned your privacy at a price no child should ever have paid. What you carry is yours. What you do with it is yours. I will help you learn to carry it, and I will not hand you to anyone who would rather study you than teach you. Thank you, Harry said. Do not thank me too quickly. Dumbledore's eyes were grave over the half-moon glasses. I am giving you a freedom, Harry, and freedom is only ever another word for the weight of your own choices. You sit in that chair now. The engine will take nothing you do not give, which means everything it ever takes again. It will take because you chose to give it. There will be nights, years from now, when you are tired or frightened or grieving, and the offer that does not expire will still be there, and there will be no piece of Voldemort to blame if you reach for it. It will only be you and the chair, and a soul on offer, and no one in the room to say no for you. He rose and put his hand once more on Harry's shoulder. I am not warning you because I doubt you. I am warning you because I watched you empty a hall of 10,000 souls tonight when you could have ruled them, and a boy who can do that is a boy I trust with the chair. But the chair is going to be there for the rest of your life. Keep the ledger, Remus taught you. This is me, every day. That is the whole of it, in the end. That is the only spell that matters. He left, and Ron and Hermione, who had been pretending to be asleep in the next beds for the sake of Madame Pomfrey, sat up the instant the door closed, and the three of them talked in low voices until the window grayed. Not about souls or engines or the peace of a Dark Lord loose in the world again, but about ordinary things, about Quidditch and exams, and whether Ron's disastrous new dress robes could be salvaged, because ordinary things were warmth that were happening. And Harry fed the engine ordinary things all night long and felt it slide off every one of them and file them, one after another, as anomalies. And it was, he thought, watching the light come up with his two friends' voices around him, the best night of his third year, in the way that all the best nights had been, which was that the fear had a shape and a name and three people looking at it instead of one boy carrying it alone. Later, much later, after the hospital wing and the chocolate and Madame Pomfrey's outrage in the long, slow, gray dawn, Harry stood alone at the same tall window he had stood at a year ago, the one above the entrance hall, and looked out at the grounds and let the heat sight come up, because it was his now, to open and close as he chose. The forest breathed, the lake lay still and empty and clean, and Harry lifted his wand, there at the window, in the first light of the morning after, and thought of the warmest thing he owned, which was not a memory anymore, because the memories had been burned, but a thing that was happening right now. Two friends asleep in the hospital wing who had refused to leave. An old man who loved him less carefully now. A teacher who had taught him which one he was, and he pushed it out through his wand and said the word. Expecto Patronum. Silver came out of his wand, warm and bright, and it gathered and it took a shape. And the shape was not a serpent. It was a stag. It stood in the gray light of the corridor, silver and warm and entirely his own, a great stag with its head up, and it looked at Harry with kind, dark eyes, and Harry looked back at it, at the shape of the truest thing in him which had turned out, after everything, after the king and the oceans and the swarm and the chair, not to be any of the things he had taken, but a thing he had been given, long ago, by a father he could not remember in a warmth that no engine in the world would ever be able to burn. Harry reached, one last time, for the voice, to see what it would say about a thing like this. A warmth made solid and given a shape by the same person whose warmth it had spent a year burning, and the voice, which was his own clear voice now and nothing else, printed one line into the quiet of his own quiet head, and there was something in it that had never been there before. Something that was almost, if a machine could manage such a thing, like wonder. No entry for this. It is not a solo schland. IT is simply yours, and it was always yours, and it cannot be added to any ledger. Filing as Molly. The stag lowered its head to him once, the way the Dementors had bowed but meaning the opposite thing entirely, and then it cantered away down the corridor and through the wall and was gone, into the morning, and Harry stood at the window, in the new light with his own two eyes and his own quiet head and his whole warm, stubborn human heart, and for the first time since a voice had spoken in a drowned chamber and called him the first of many, he was entirely and gladly himself. Chapter 5, End.